You've been taught to fight life, to control every outcome, to chase what you want and fear what you might lose. But what if everything you've been told about control is a lie? What if peace doesn't come from holding on, but from letting go, from trusting what you cannot predict, from allowing life to move the way it needs to? You see, the reason you feel anxious, restless, afraid of the unknown is not because life is cruel. It's because you keep trying to stop the river from flowing. You keep trying to make the wind stand still. But Buddhism teaches a different path, a quiet truth that changes everything. Whatever comes, let it come. Whatever goes, let it go. Because peace isn't in winning or losing. It's in accepting the rhythm of things. It's in knowing you are part of something vast and intelligent, something that never gets it wrong. Tonight, as you hear these words, something inside you will soften. The noise will fade. The need to control will start to dissolve, and in its place, you'll feel something deeper. Trust the kind that doesn't need answers, the kind that feels like coming home. This isn't just another talk about calmness. This is a return to yourself, to the stillness that's been waiting behind all the chaos. Are you ready? Let's begin. Before we begin, take a slow breath and feel the weight in your chest that you've been carrying for far too long. The pressure to fix, to know, to control. The way your mind keeps trying to solve life as if it were a puzzle that must make sense before you can rest. This is where the real lesson begins. Not in doing more, but in finally allowing life to move without your constant interference. There's a kind of peace that only arrives when you stop trying to wrestle reality into your shape. You've probably felt the opposite. Those moments when you try so hard to make something work, only to watch it slip through your fingers anyway. That's the moment when life whispers its most honest truth. The tighter you hold, the faster it disappears. Allowing is not weakness. It's the quiet strength to stay open when everything in you wants to close. Letting go is one of the hardest things a human being can do, not because the act itself requires effort, but because the mind is addicted to control. Control gives the illusion of safety. It makes you believe that if you plan enough, prepare enough, think enough, you can prevent pain. But life doesn't obey those calculations. It moves like water, too fluid to contain, too vast to own. The discipline of allowing begins the moment you stop chasing certainty and begin to trust that what needs to happen will happen even without your pushing. Most people confuse allowing with laziness, but they couldn't be more different. Laziness is born of apathy. Allowing is born of awareness. It's not sitting back and hoping the world takes care of you. It's staying fully awake as things unfold, without forcing them to fit your idea of how they should be. It's choosing to participate with life rather than trying to dominate it. This discipline demands an alert stillness. It's not the silence of giving up, it's the silence of deep listening. When you truly allow, you start to hear what life is saying beneath the noise. You start to notice that every delay, every detour, every ending carries a hidden rhythm. Sometimes what you call bad timing is actually divine timing. Sometimes what feels like a loss is just space being made for something greater to arrive. The reason so many people suffer is not because life is cruel. It's because they keep resisting what already is. They fight the present moment as if their protest could rewrite reality. But the truth is, what's happening right now is already happening. You can argue with it, or accept it. One brings pain, the other brings peace. When you stop resisting, you don't become passive. You become powerful in a different way. You align yourself with the natural flow of things, and in that alignment, life begins to work with you instead of against you. This doesn't mean you stop caring or taking action. Allowing doesn't mean you never move. It means you move without tension. It's the difference between forcing a flower to bloom and creating the right conditions for it to open naturally. You water, you nurture, but you don't pull at the petals. The same goes for your goals, your relationships, your healing. You give effort without anxiety. You let the results come when they are ready. There is a deep intelligence moving through all things, even the moments you don't understand. When you allow, you stop trying to be smarter than the universe. You stop demanding that life follow your timeline. You begin to trust that everything has its own pace, and that peace comes not from speeding things up, but from syncing yourself to the rhythm of what's unfolding. This is the hidden discipline most people miss because it feels unnatural at first. The human ego thrives on doing. It measures worth by productivity, by visible progress, by constant movement. But the most powerful transformations happen in stillness, like seeds breaking open underground. You don't see the growth while it's happening, but that doesn't mean nothing is occurring. The discipline of allowing means learning to rest inside that unseen process. Think about how nature functions. The ocean doesn't struggle to create waves. The trees don't beg the sun to rise. The seasons don't fight their change. There's an effortless intelligence guiding every movement, and that same intelligence flows through you. When you stop trying to control everything, you return to harmony with it. That's why allowing feels peaceful. It's your natural state. The mind, however, doesn't like peace. It prefers problems, because problems keep it busy, important, in charge. That's why it whispers thoughts like, if I don't worry, I'll lose control, or if I don't fight, I'll fall behind. But notice what those thoughts really do. They create tension without producing wisdom. Worry doesn't change outcomes, it only changes your peace. Allowing teaches you to step back and observe those thoughts without letting them drag you into their chaos. At first, this feels like doing nothing, but it's actually a very active form of awareness. It's the discipline of staying present while your old habits of control burn away. You'll notice moments of discomfort, moments when the urge to interfere feels unbearable. That's the training. Every time you resist that urge, you strengthen a deeper trust. You start to realize that life has been carrying you all along, even when you thought you were steering. The more you practice allowing, the more you start to see how much energy you've wasted trying to control the uncontrollable. You'll begin to feel lighter, clearer, more aligned. You'll notice that problems start resolving themselves without your panic, that answers come not from overthinking, but from quiet insight. It's as if by stepping back, you give life the space to breathe for you. This discipline isn't about denying emotion. You will still feel anger, sadness, fear. Allowing means letting those feelings move through you without labeling them as wrong. It's recognizing that emotions are temporary weather, not your identity. When you stop fighting them, they pass naturally. It's your resistance that turns them into storms. The moment you allow yourself to feel fully without judgment, you discover that pain itself can be a teacher. It humbles the ego and brings you closer to truth. Letting go in this way is a daily practice. It's not a one-time realization, but a constant returning, a gentle reminder each time you get pulled back into control. It's saying to yourself, I don't have to fix this right now. I can stay open. I can let life unfold. This creates a quiet confidence, a knowing that even when you don't understand the reason, there is one. One of the hardest parts of allowing is accepting that not everything needs your intervention. The mind always wants to solve, but many situations dissolve on their own when given space. It's like a muddy pond. The more you stir it, the murkier it gets. When you leave it alone, the water clears by itself. Allowing is learning to trust the natural clarity that emerges when you stop stirring your life into confusion. You may notice that when you allow instead of interfere, people respond differently. Conversations soften. Conflicts lose their edge. Opportunities appear effortlessly. That's because you're no longer vibrating with resistance. You're radiating openness. Others feel it, even if they can't explain it. You become like still water, reflective, calm, yet full of quiet power. It takes courage to live this way because the world glorifies control. Society rewards the ones who plan every detail, who hustle endlessly, who chase perfection. But the cost of that constant striving is exhaustion. You can't force peace by effort. True peace arrives when you stop chasing it. The discipline of allowing invites you to shift from striving to trusting. You might ask, if I just allow everything, won't I lose direction? The answer is no. Allowing doesn't mean you have no intention. It means your intention is free from desperation. You still have dreams, goals, and values, but they no longer come from fear. You act from alignment, not anxiety. You trust that if something is truly meant for you, it will move toward you without struggle, and if it leaves, it was never yours to hold. This approach to life changes the way you see time. You stop rushing to the next thing because you understand that nothing real can be missed. When you live this way, each moment becomes complete in itself. You realize that happiness isn't waiting for you at the end of your plans. It's here, hidden in the stillness of now. There's a Buddhist teaching that says, when you let go of what you think you are, you become what you truly are. That's the essence of this discipline. When you stop defining yourself by achievements, possessions, or control, you rediscover your natural wholeness. You realize you were never broken, just distracted. Allowing brings you home to that truth. As this awareness deepens, your relationship with struggle changes. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start seeing each challenge as part of the unfolding. You begin to sense the quiet perfection beneath the apparent chaos. The moments that used to trigger frustration now invite reflection. You no longer rush to escape discomfort. You listen to it. You understand that growth doesn't come from forcing change, but from allowing transformation to happen naturally, the way dawn replaces night. The more you practice allowing, the more humble you become. You see how vast life is, how small the self's control truly was. Yet this humility isn't defeat, it's liberation. It frees you from the exhausting role of playing God in your own story. You can finally rest in the truth that you are part of something far wiser than your mind can comprehend. In this resting, clarity emerges. You start to act not from fear, but from intuition. You sense the right timing without analysis. You know when to move, when to pause, when to speak, when to remain silent. Life begins to feel guided, not forced. The effort you used to waste on control transforms into calm energy that fuels authentic action. This is why allowing is called a discipline. It requires awareness, patience, and faith. It asks you to stay open even when nothing makes sense. It challenges you to replace reaction with observation, worry with presence, tension with breath. Every time you succeed in doing that, even for a few seconds, you strengthen your inner peace. Over time, this peace becomes unshakable. You realize that nothing external can disturb the stillness within you unless you allow it. Events continue to rise and fall, but you no longer get lost in them. You become the sky rather than the storm. You begin to live from the center instead of the surface. Allowing also heals relationships because it replaces judgment with understanding. You no longer demand that people behave according to your expectations. You give them the space to be who they are, and in that space, love becomes unconditional. True compassion is born from allowing others to follow their own paths without trying to control their journeys. Even your relationship with yourself transforms. You stop criticizing your past, stop rushing your healing, stop comparing your timeline to others. You begin to treat yourself with the same patience you offer to life. You realize that self-acceptance is the foundation of inner peace. The hidden discipline of allowing is not about giving up. It's about giving in to the truth that life knows what it's doing. When you align with that truth, fear loses its power. You stop wasting your energy fighting what is and start living in harmony with what's becoming. This is not submission, it's cooperation with reality. The more you live this way, the more you notice that everything you once chased, peace, clarity, fulfillment, starts arising naturally. You didn't need to fight for them. You only needed to stop blocking them. Allowing opens the door to grace. It lets life express itself through you without resistance. And slowly, you begin to see that every moment, whether joyful or painful, was never random. It was all part of the great unfolding that has been guiding you towards surrender. Each struggle was a lesson in trust, each delay a teacher in patience, each loss a nudge toward awakening. When you truly understand this, you stop clinging to how things should be and start flowing with how they are. You no longer fear uncertainty because you see that uncertainty is not emptiness, it's possibility. You no longer fear endings because you sense that each ending carries a hidden beginning. This is the hidden discipline of allowing, to stay awake, to stay soft, to stay present in the ever-changing dance of life without needing to control its rhythm. It is not laziness, it is mastery. It's the calm confidence of knowing that you are exactly where you need to be, even if your mind can't yet see why. And in that state, everything changes, not because the world obeys you, but because you have learned to trust the world. You become unshakable, not through control, but through surrender. You find peace, not by winning the fight against life, but by laying down your arms and realizing that life was never your enemy. This is where true strength begins, not in domination, but in devotion, not in holding tighter, but in opening wider. Whatever comes, let it come. Whatever goes, let it go. Because what's meant for you can't miss you, and what leaves you was never yours to hold. When you live from that truth, You finally understand the freedom the wise ones spoke of, the freedom of letting life be exactly what it is and finding peace in the allowing. You reach a point where allowing becomes natural, where control feels heavy and surrender feels like air. But even as you begin to flow with life, there comes another challenge, the space where nothing is certain, that uncomfortable silence between what has ended and what has not yet begun. It's the gap most people try to escape, but this is where the deepest transformation happens. The unknown is not empty, it's alive. It's not a void, it's the womb of creation itself. Uncertainty is where truth begins to whisper. It's the moment when all your plans dissolve and the mind panics because it no longer has a map. You stand in front of 1,000 possible futures and none of them feel clear. That's where fear lives. But fear only rises when the ego loses its script, because it doesn't know who to be without certainty. Yet this space, the one that feels unbearable, is sacred. It's where the false parts of you begin to die and something greater starts to form. The human mind is wired to seek stability. It wants guarantees. It wants straight lines in a universe made of curves. That's why uncertainty feels threatening. It exposes how fragile control really is. But what if you could see uncertainty not as a threat, but as raw spiritual material, the kind that, when embraced, turns fear into wisdom? This is the alchemy of uncertainty, transforming what you cannot predict into the very source of your freedom. In alchemy, base metals are turned into gold. Spiritually, uncertainty is the base metal of the human experience. It feels heavy, dull, and undesired. But if you learn to rest within it, without running, without forcing an answer, it starts to change form. It becomes insight, clarity, trust. You begin to see that the unknown is not against you. It's what life uses to shape your growth. Every master, every awakened being has learned to stand calmly in that fire. When you stop resisting uncertainty, your nervous system begins to quiet. You notice that not knowing is not the same as danger. It's simply a pause, a breath in the grand rhythm of life. Yet most people never reach that stillness because they treat uncertainty as an emergency to fix rather than a teacher to listen to. They chase predictions, demand closure, fill silence with noise. But in doing so, they miss the subtle guidance that only reveals itself when the mind is quiet. Every moment of uncertainty carries hidden intelligence. You can't think your way into seeing it. You can only relax enough to feel it. The mind is impatient. It wants to know now. But life speaks slowly, through patterns, through small nudges, through intuition. The alchemy begins the moment you stop asking, "When will this end?" and start asking, "What is this showing me?" That single shift turns fear into awareness. Uncertainty reveals your attachments. It shows you where you still depend on external things for your sense of safety. When a plan falls apart, when a person leaves, when the path disappears, it's not life punishing you. It's life showing you where you've placed your trust in the temporary. The discomfort you feel isn't the unknown hurting you. It's your old expectations dying. The mind calls it loss, but the soul calls it freedom. To rest in the unknown means to stand in the middle of chaos without needing it to make sense. It's not passivity, it's maturity. It's understanding that the deepest answers often arrive only after you've stopped demanding them. When you can stay still inside uncertainty, you build an inner stability that no external event can shake. That's real power. Most people want life to be linear. Problem, solution, relief. But spiritual growth doesn't follow that formula. It moves in spirals, revisiting old lessons at deeper levels, bringing you closer to clarity each time. The unknown is the space between spirals. It's the pause where integration happens. It's where the lesson becomes wisdom. If you rush through it, you interrupt the transformation and end up repeating the same cycles. The practice of resting in uncertainty is the opposite of avoidance. Avoidance is closing your eyes because you don't want to see. Resting in the unknown is keeping your eyes open even when the view is dark. It's saying, I will stay present with this confusion until it teaches me what it came to teach. That's courage. It's not glamorous. It's raw, quiet, and deeply personal. But it's how consciousness expands. When you stop trying to escape the unknown, something miraculous happens. You start to notice small signs that were always there. A conversation that feels meaningful, a phrase that repeats in your mind, a coincidence that feels too precise to ignore. Life communicates in whispers, not in shouts. Uncertainty sharpens your hearing. It teaches you to listen beneath logic, to sense patterns invisible to the intellect. This is the gold hidden in the dark, the awakening of intuition. Uncertainty also reveals the illusion of permanence. The truth is, everything you see, your job, your health, your relationships, is in constant motion. When you try to make them fixed, you suffer. When you let them be fluid, you discover peace in motion. To live peacefully in an uncertain world, you must learn to hold everything lightly. You appreciate what is here, knowing it may change. You love deeply, knowing love evolves. You work diligently, knowing outcomes may differ. This lightness is not detachment. It's freedom from clinging. The unknown often feels cruel because it dismantles the comfort of identity. You lose what you thought defined you, the role, the relationship, the plan, and suddenly you don't know who you are. But in that loss, a larger truth is born. You begin to sense that who you are has never depended on external things. You are the awareness that witnesses change, not the things that change. The unknown strips away illusions until only what's real remains. Every person who has awakened has walked through this darkness. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, not knowing if enlightenment would come. Rumi wandered through heartbreak before his poetry became divine. Even stars are born from collapse. The point is not to avoid the uncertainty, but to let it remake you. When you face it without resistance, you begin to shine from within. The ego treats uncertainty as an enemy, but the soul recognizes it as initiation. It's the bridge between the old self and the new. Each time life takes away something familiar, a relationship, a job, a dream, it's preparing space for a deeper expression of who you are. But you can't see the new while clinging to the old. The bridge must be crossed in darkness. That's why trust is essential. Trust is not blind faith. It's inner knowing that even if you can't see the path, there is a path. The habit of demanding certainty is rooted in fear, and fear always shrinks your world. You stop taking chances, stop expressing your truth, stop exploring new directions. But when you learn to rest in the unknown, your world expands again. You become open to new experiences, to synchronicity, to possibilities the rational mind could never plan. Uncertainty, once your prison, becomes your freedom. There's a quiet joy that comes when you no longer need to know what's next. It's not excitement, it's serenity. You wake up each morning curious rather than anxious. You start to notice beauty in small things because you're no longer lost in expectation. The rain feels softer, silence feels full, and even delays feel meaningful. You start living in partnership with the mystery rather than in opposition to it. Resting in the unknown also changes how you make decisions. Instead of reacting from fear or urgency, you begin to respond from stillness. You act when clarity arises, not when anxiety demands it. This creates harmony between your inner world and outer actions. You stop chasing, and life starts meeting you halfway. Timing becomes effortless, not because you control it, but because you've learned to wait for alignment. Many people think peace comes from answers, but answers are temporary. Today's certainty becomes tomorrow's confusion. True peace comes from comfort with not knowing, from being rooted in presence rather than prediction. This is what sages mean when they say, "Be still and know." It's not an instruction to stop living. It's a reminder that wisdom arises when you stop struggling for it. The unknown is not a punishment. It's an invitation to deepen your trust, to grow your patience, to dissolve the boundaries between who you think you are and what life is making you into. Every great shift in your life will come wrapped in uncertainty first. If you run from it, you run from your own evolution. But if you stay, you'll witness transformation that no plan could have created. To turn uncertainty into spiritual gold, you must first allow yourself to feel its raw edges. Let the fear, confusion, and doubt surface. Don't analyze them, just feel them. Emotions are energy looking for release. When you stop suppressing them, they move through you, leaving wisdom behind. The gold appears in the ashes of what you were willing to feel fully. Over time, your relationship with uncertainty becomes softer. You stop labeling it as good or bad. You start seeing it as the natural pulse of existence. Like the tide that rises and falls, uncertainty becomes another rhythm you learn to dance with. You no longer need to rush toward clarity. You let clarity find you. And when it does, it's not intellectual, it's embodied. You just know what's right without needing proof. This quiet knowing changes everything. You no longer beg the universe for signs. You begin to live as one. Your calm becomes magnetic. Your presence becomes healing. People feel safe around you because you radiate trust, not control. This is the mark of one who has mastered the alchemy of uncertainty. They move through life as a lighthouse, steady amid the storm, not because the sea is calm, but because they have learned to be the calm within it. Living this way requires surrender, but also responsibility. Surrender does not mean neglecting your path. It means walking it with awareness. You still take steps, make plans, pursue dreams, but you do so without fear of what you can't control. You act with sincerity, release the outcome, and trust that whatever unfolds serves your highest growth. That trust frees you from anxiety and makes your actions more powerful because they are not polluted by desperation. Resting in the unknown also deepens compassion. When you understand how fragile and unpredictable life is, you stop judging others so harshly. You realize everyone is navigating their own uncertainty. You start to listen more, to comfort rather than correct, to help without expectation. The humility born from uncertainty opens the heart. It makes you gentle because you see how easily everything can change. There is a quiet beauty in realizing that life doesn't owe you certainty. It never promised safety. It promised experience. And every experience, whether joyful or painful, adds texture to your being. The unknown is the canvas on which life paints its art. To reject it is to reject your own becoming. The mind will always crave closure, but closure is not the same as peace. Closure is the ego's attempt to end discomfort. Peace is the soul's ability to rest within it. When you reach that peace, uncertainty loses its grip. You begin to move through transitions, career changes, heartbreaks, health challenges with grace. You stop rushing to rebuild the old and allow the new to form organically. In this way, the unknown becomes a spiritual teacher. It teaches patience when you want speed, humility when you crave control, trust when you demand proof. It reshapes your relationship with time, teaching you that growth can't be measured by how quickly you understand something, but by how deeply you live through it. At the core of this teaching is surrender, not as defeat, but as devotion to life itself. You begin to see that the same force that grows forests and spins galaxies is also guiding your path. The unknown is how that intelligence speaks. It removes what no longer serves you and brings what does, even if it confuses you in the process. Your role is not to resist, but to stay awake, to listen, to participate with an open heart. As you continue walking this path, you start noticing how much lighter you feel. The constant mental noise fades. You no longer obsess over the future or replay the past. You begin to trust the unfolding moment by moment. The need to predict disappears because you have learned that whatever comes will come, and when it does, you will meet it with presence. This trust is not blind, it's earned. It's born from countless moments of standing in uncertainty and discovering that life still carried you. Every time you thought it was over, something new began. Every time you feared collapse, you found a deeper strength. Over and over, uncertainty proved itself to be not a curse, but a guide. In this realization, fear transforms into reverence. You start to bow to the mystery instead of battling it. You see how each period of not knowing was actually grace in disguise, preparing you for wisdom you could not yet understand. You begin to thank the pauses, the endings, the unanswered prayers. You stop needing certainty because you have found something more sacred, trust. And when you trust, you become unstoppable. Not because everything goes your way, but because nothing can take away your peace. You live in harmony with the mystery, content to not have all the answers. You finally understand that the unknown was never empty. It was full of life waiting to reveal itself through you. This is the alchemy of uncertainty, to rest in the mystery until fear becomes faith, until confusion becomes clarity, until the unknown itself becomes your teacher. When you master this, you no longer seek to escape life's uncertainty. You begin to worship it, knowing that it is through the unknown that you meet the divine. There comes a moment after you've learned to rest in uncertainty when you start to notice something subtle within yourself, a quiet resistance, a voice that whispers, "This can't be right. I should be doing more." It's not life testing you anymore, it's your own mind clinging to the illusion of control. You've touched the peace that comes from trusting the unknown, but now the ego begins to tremble. It doesn't know how to survive in flow. This is where the deeper lesson begins, understanding why the self fears surrender and why unpredictability threatens the illusion that you're the one steering the river. The ego thrives on patterns, on structure, on identity. It wants to label, to define, to grasp. It cannot stand the idea that life might move without its permission. So, when you begin to trust the flow, when you start letting things unfold naturally, the ego feels like it's dying, because in truth, it is. What dissolves in flow is not your personality or your will, but your false sense of ownership over life's direction. The ego believes it is the doer, the maker, the controller. Flow reveals that life moves by itself, and this realization terrifies the part of you that has built its entire existence on control. This fear of flow is ancient. From birth, the mind learns to divide the world into me and not me. It creates borders, my body, my name, my possessions, my beliefs. It says, "This is who I am." But flow has no interest in borders. Flow moves freely through all things. When you enter it, the edges blur. You start to feel less like a separate person and more like an open space through which experience happens. To the ego, this feels like annihilation. To the soul, it feels like home. That's why even after spiritual awakening, resistance returns in subtle forms. You start to think, if I let go too much, won't I lose myself? Or, if I stop trying, won't everything fall apart? But what really falls apart is not your life. It's your illusion of control over it. Flow doesn't erase you, it reveals you. It shows you that what you've been calling I was only a temporary identity, like a wave forgetting it belongs to the ocean. The ego's fear of flow is the fear of dissolving into something larger. It's like a candle afraid of the sunrise. It doesn't understand that its light isn't being destroyed. It's being absorbed into something infinite. But the ego only feels safe when it's separate, when it can measure and predict. It feels threatened by spontaneity, by change, by the unknown rhythm of existence. That's why people cling to habits, routines, and roles long after they've stopped serving them. Familiarity gives the illusion of control, but it also blocks the current of life from moving freely through you. To see how this works, look at your own resistance. Think about the moments you felt anxious before a big decision, the times you hesitated before taking a step into something new. The anxiety wasn't about the situation itself. It was about the mind losing its grip on certainty. The ego confuses predictability with safety, so when life asks you to step into the unpredictable, it interprets that as danger. But danger and transformation often wear the same face. The difference is in how you meet them. Flow invites you to let go of plans when they no longer serve. It asks you to act from intuition rather than fear. Yet, the ego wants strategy, not spontaneity. It wants results, not surrender. It wants to know what's coming next before it moves. That's why so many people stay stuck. They're waiting for clarity while refusing to take a step. But flow doesn't reveal the whole path at once. It reveals it step by step as you walk. Each act of trust lights the next stone. The ego's resistance to flow also appears in relationships. When someone behaves unpredictably, the mind panics because it can't categorize them. When a person leaves or changes, the ego feels betrayed because it thought it had secured love. But love that can be possessed is not real love. It's control disguised as care. Flow shows you that relationships, like rivers, have seasons. Some flow toward you, some away. Holding on only creates suffering. True connection thrives in freedom. The more you allow people to be who they are, the more love becomes unconditional, not a contract, but a communion. In work and creativity, the same principle applies. The ego demands constant productivity, measurable progress, tangible results. It fears rest because rest means releasing control. Yet the greatest creations don't come from force. They come from allowing inspiration to move through you. Every artist, writer, or innovator knows that there are moments when effort must pause so that something larger can take over. That's flow. It's the space where the mind steps aside and intelligence moves unfiltered. But to stay open to that intelligence, you must be willing to not know when or how it will arrive. The ego's fear of flow is rooted in the illusion that it is separate from life. It believes it is the thinker of thoughts, the chooser of actions, the creator of outcomes. But if you look closely, you'll see that thoughts arise by themselves. Emotions move on their own, and inspiration comes uninvited. Even the decision to act appears as a spontaneous impulse. The mind then claims ownership, saying, "I did this." Yet that "I" was never in control. It was merely the witness of what was always unfolding. When you begin to see this clearly, the fear starts to loosen. You realize that letting go doesn't mean losing your agency. It means surrendering the illusion that your agency was ever separate from the larger movement of life. You still act, but your actions flow naturally, without the strain of overthinking. You become an instrument rather than a manager, a participant rather than a controller. This shift can feel disorienting at first. The ego thrives on identity, the worker, the parent, the partner, the achiever. When flow begins to move you beyond those labels, it doesn't know how to define itself. You may feel lost, as though your old self is dissolving. But that disorientation is actually expansion. You are not losing yourself. You are outgrowing a smaller version of yourself. The caterpillar doesn't die. It transforms. The fear of flow is the fear of transformation disguised as self-preservation. The ego will do anything to maintain its illusion of control, even if it means suffering. It would rather be anxious and certain than peaceful and free. That's why people repeat painful patterns, staying in unfulfilling jobs, toxic relationships, rigid beliefs, because at least those are familiar. But flow asks you to trade familiarity for authenticity. It asks you to let the false sense of safety dissolve so that real safety, the kind that comes from alignment, can emerge. To overcome this fear, awareness is key. Start noticing the small ways your ego resists flow. When plans change, do you tighten inside? When things don't go as expected, do you feel angry or anxious? When someone disagrees with you, do you immediately defend? Each reaction is a moment where the ego fights for control. But if you can pause, breathe, and watch that reaction without feeding it, you weaken its grip. You begin to realize that flow is still happening even when the ego resists. The river doesn't stop because one leaf refuses to move. When you stop identifying with the ego's resistance, flow becomes effortless. You start to trust the natural intelligence that moves everything, the same force that makes your heart beat and your lungs breathe. You see that life has always been flowing through you. It's only your mind that's been trying to claim ownership. The truth is, you were never separate from the flow. You were the flow, temporarily pretending to be the swimmer. The ego's deepest illusion is the belief that control brings freedom. It doesn't. Control brings tension, and tension is the opposite of freedom. The more tightly you hold, the less space there is for life to move through you. Freedom arises not from mastering the flow, but from merging with it. The river doesn't fight the current. It is the current. When you stop resisting, you discover that life has been carrying you exactly where you need to go all along. This realization doesn't mean you stop making choices. It means your choices no longer come from fear. You choose with clarity, not compulsion. You move because it feels aligned, not because you're trying to escape uncertainty. The ego acts to avoid discomfort. Flow acts because movement itself is joy. The difference is subtle but profound. One creates exhaustion, the other creates peace. In truth, the ego fears flow because flow exposes its illusion. When you are deeply present, you can't find the I that claims ownership. You look for it, and it dissolves. What remains is awareness, vast, quiet, infinite. From that space, life lives itself. Words are spoken, steps are taken, creations appear, but there's no sense of personal doership. Everything happens effortlessly. That's why the sages spoke of non-doing, not as inactivity, but as pure participation without ego. To live this way is not easy in a world that celebrates control. Society teaches you to plan, to calculate, to dominate outcomes. But control is brittle, flow is resilient. When things go wrong, the controller breaks, the one in flow bends. Flexibility is strength in motion. Flow gives you that strength, the ability to move through change with grace. As you continue to trust the flow, fear begins to transform into curiosity. You stop asking, "What if it doesn't work out?" and start wondering, "What if it works out better than I imagined?" You begin to see life as collaboration rather than competition. You no longer feel like a separate entity struggling against the universe, but a conscious expression of it. The weight of self-importance lifts, and in its place arises lightness, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on outcomes. The ego will still try to return, whispering doubts, trying to reclaim control, but you'll start to see through it. You'll recognize that its fears are just echoes of the past, old survival mechanisms pretending to be wisdom. You'll thank it for trying to protect you, and then you'll let it rest. The more you honor flow, the quieter that voice becomes. Eventually, it fades into the background like a child who finally feels safe enough to stop shouting for attention. In that quiet, life begins to speak clearly again. You realize that everything, even resistance, was part of the flow. Every mistake, every detour, every loss was necessary to bring you to this understanding. Nothing was wasted. Even your ego, with all its fears, was part of the awakening. It was the friction that helped you discover what doesn't need to be controlled. This is the paradox. When the ego lets go, it doesn't die. It transforms into a servant of the flow. It stops being a dictator and becomes a tool. Your mind becomes sharper, your actions more aligned, your energy more refined. You don't suppress the self. You refine it until it becomes transparent enough for the light of awareness to shine through. When you live this way, you stop fearing unpredictability. You see it as proof that life is alive. You stop trying to perfect the plan and instead perfect your trust. You move with faith that each step will reveal the next. This is what true surrender feels like. Not weakness, but profound cooperation with existence. The ego's fear of flow is the final veil between you and peace. Once it lifts, you no longer fight life's rhythm. You dance with it. You let the river carry you, not because you're powerless, but because you've realized that you are the river. The current that moves you is the same force that moves the stars, and in that knowing, fear dissolves completely. What remains is presence, pure, effortless, and alive. You don't chase the flow anymore. You live as it. You act, love, create, and rest from a place that no longer needs control to feel safe. That's the end of fear and the beginning of true freedom, where life flows through you and you, at last, stop resisting the miracle of what comes. When the fear of flow begins to dissolve, something even deeper awakens. A quiet realization appears. What resists the current isn't just the ego's need for control, but the part of you that refuses to die. Not death in the physical sense, but the small deaths that happen every day. The fading of moods, the crumbling of identities, the loss of what was once important. The more you live in flow, the more you notice how often life asks you to let go, not once, but constantly. This is the tender art of dying daily, the practice of releasing everything the moment it stops being real and meeting the next breath as if it were the first. Most people spend their lives avoiding death, not realizing that clinging to permanence is what makes them suffer. Everything in existence is in motion. Cells regenerate, seasons shift, thoughts arise and vanish. Yet the human mind tries to freeze moments as if time could be held still. We keep stories alive long after they've expired. We hold on to identities long after they've outgrown us. We replay old emotions as though they define us. But to truly live is to let all of it die gracefully, again and again, without bitterness. The art of dying daily is not about sadness or loss. It's about liberation. It's about learning to let every part of you that is no longer needed return to silence. The attachment to identity is the first thing that begins to dissolve. You are born into names, roles, expectations, and you spend decades believing that's who you are. Yet these are only temporary costumes life wears to experience itself. When one role ends, another appears. The problem is that the mind doesn't like transitions. It holds on to what was, afraid of emptiness. But emptiness is not the enemy, it's the womb of renewal. To die daily means to stop clinging to who you were 5 minutes ago. It means to allow each moment to rewrite you. When you do this, life feels lighter because you are no longer dragging your past into every conversation, decision, or thought. You begin to live as awareness itself, fluid, open, untethered. This is not indifference, it's the deepest form of engagement, because when you are free from clinging, you meet life directly, without distortion. Letting identities dissolve is difficult because they provide comfort. They give you a sense of, I am someone. But that sense is fragile. The moment someone challenges your identity, you feel attacked. The ego fights back, defends, resists, because it cannot survive without its labels. The art of dying daily teaches you to see identity as a temporary tool rather than your essence. You can play a role fully, parent, friend, teacher, without confusing the role with who you are. The actor doesn't cry when the play ends. They bow, step off stage, and prepare for the next act. That is mastery. In the same way, moods and emotions also ask to be released once they've expressed their purpose. Yet most people live trapped in emotional residues, carrying anger from years ago, grief from relationships long past, regret for choices they can no longer change. Dying daily means allowing emotions to move through without storage. When sadness arises, you feel it fully, but you don't weave a story around it. When joy appears, you celebrate it without grasping. Every feeling becomes an event, not a definition. You no longer say, I am sad. You recognize sadness is moving through. This subtle shift transforms suffering into movement. The beauty of this practice is that it brings you closer to truth with every breath. Every time you release an old story, you return to what's real right now. The past becomes a teacher instead of a trap. The future becomes possibility rather than pressure. You live in the eternal present, where everything begins and ends simultaneously. You stop fearing endings because you see they are just beginnings wearing different clothes. To die daily also means letting attachments dissolve, the emotional bonds that tie your peace to external things, people, possessions, routines, even beliefs. The more you depend on them for identity or happiness, the more fragile you become. Nothing you can hold on to will stay forever. People change, bodies age, opinions evolve. Trying to freeze them only creates pain. Detachment doesn't mean rejection. It means loving everything deeply without needing it to stay. When you love without clinging, you love truly, because your love is not a contract. It's an offering. The mind resists this process because it equates letting go with losing. But death, in its purest form, is transformation. The seed must die for the plant to grow. The leaf must fall for the tree to rest. The night must end for dawn to rise. When you see this rhythm in nature, you begin to understand that death is not an interruption. It's a continuation. Life is not a straight line, it's a circle, an infinite exchange of giving and releasing. The art of dying daily aligns you with that rhythm. Practicing this doesn't mean withdrawing from the world. It means engaging more fully, knowing everything is borrowed. You cherish moments precisely because you know they won't last. You listen more deeply because you know each word may be the last of its kind. You love more sincerely because you no longer assume there will be another chance. This awareness doesn't make you morbid, it makes you alive. The fleeting nature of everything becomes sacred. There's a softness that grows from this kind of awareness. When you stop clinging, judgment begins to fade. You no longer expect people to be consistent because you understand they too are dying and being reborn every day. You no longer demand permanence from situations because you see that change is the only constant. You forgive more easily because you no longer hold on to offense like a possession. Every act of forgiveness is a small death, the death of pride, of resentment, of the need to be right. Each one frees you a little more. Even thoughts themselves are born and die in you constantly. Yet the ego identifies with them, saying, "This is what I think," as if thought were stable. But the next day, the thought changes. The art of dying daily means watching thoughts arise and vanish without attachment. You stop fighting to be consistent. You let yourself evolve. Consistency is a trap that keeps the old self alive. Growth requires death, again and again. Every night when you go to sleep, life gives you a rehearsal for dying. The body releases control, the mind lets go of identity, and consciousness returns to silence. Each morning, you awaken renewed. This natural rhythm is a reminder that death is not final, it's cyclical. When you learn to die consciously while alive, letting go of what has completed its purpose, you stop fearing the physical end. You see that the essence of you, the awareness watching all these changes, has never died and never will. To die daily means to practice humility. It means admitting that you don't own anything, not your body, not your relationships, not even your beliefs. They are all temporary expressions moving through your awareness. When you accept that, gratitude arises. You begin to thank life for every fleeting moment instead of demanding permanence. Gratitude grows naturally from impermanence because it knows everything is a gift, not a guarantee. This kind of living changes your entire relationship with time. You stop postponing peace until things are perfect. You stop waiting for the right moment to be happy. You realize that the right moment is always now, because now is all that ever exists. When you die daily, every second becomes alive again. You start living with intensity, but without anxiety. You give your full attention to what's before you, and when it passes, you release it with love. Many people resist this because they think detachment will make them cold or emotionless. The truth is the opposite. When you're not clinging, your heart opens wider. You're no longer afraid of loss, so you can love fully. You can cry deeply without being broken. You can care profoundly without needing control. Detachment and compassion are not opposites, they are partners. Only those who can let go fully can love fully. The tender art of dying daily also dismantles pride. Pride clings to success, reputation, and image. It fears mistakes because they threaten the mask. But when you die daily, failure loses its sting. Each mistake becomes just another death of the false self. You stop needing to be perfect, and you start becoming real. Perfection is brittle. Authenticity is fluid. When you allow yourself to die to who you were yesterday, you open space for who you can become tomorrow. This practice also transforms how you deal with pain. Instead of resisting or dramatizing it, You let it burn away what's false. Suffering is not punishment. It's purification. It removes the layers that block your natural peace. Every heartbreak, disappointment, or loss is a small death of attachment, making room for more freedom. When you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start seeing, "What part of me is being asked to die?" you shift from victim to participant in your evolution. Dying daily means living with constant renewal. You stop clinging to yesterday's version of yourself. You stop replaying your old mistakes like a film that never ends. You understand that who you were is not who you are, and who you are is not who you will be. The self is a process, not a product. This realization removes the heaviness of guilt and regret. You begin to treat yourself with kindness because you see that the you who made mistakes doesn't exist anymore. To truly master this art, awareness must become your anchor. Awareness is the part of you that doesn't die. It watches the body age, the emotions shift, the thoughts change, yet it remains untouched. When you rest in that awareness, every death becomes peaceful. You no longer fear endings because you've discovered the one thing that doesn't end. This is what mystics mean when they say, "Die before you die." They are pointing to the freedom that comes when you no longer cling to the temporary. When you practice dying daily, your energy begins to change. You start moving through the world with quiet presence. You stop needing to dominate conversations, win arguments, or prove your worth. You understand that silence often speaks more powerfully than words. You start valuing stillness over noise, depth over speed, being over doing. This shift doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise. Your actions carry more impact because they come from clarity, not compulsion. This daily dying also reveals the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is inevitable. It comes with change, loss, growth. Suffering, however, is optional. It's what happens when you resist pain. When you allow endings to unfold without resistance, pain still exists, but it passes through quickly, leaving wisdom behind. When you fight it, you trap it inside you, turning temporary pain into ongoing suffering. The art of dying daily ends this unnecessary suffering. Over time, dying daily becomes effortless. It no longer feels like letting go. It feels like flowing naturally. You wake each day lighter, less attached, more open. You no longer fear what's coming because you've already practiced releasing what's gone. This kind of freedom cannot be taught intellectually. It's lived through continual surrender. Each breath becomes a micro-death, a mini-release, a return to the present. Through this practice, even life's biggest transitions, aging, illness, loss, begin to feel less tragic and more sacred. You see them as part of the same cycle that makes flowers bloom and fade. You stop dividing the world into good and bad, beginning and end. You start seeing only movement, life breathing in and out of itself endlessly. Death, then, becomes not an end, but a transformation into new forms of life. When you live this way, gratitude deepens into reverence. You begin to bow inwardly to everything: the laughter, the tears, the arrivals, the departures. You no longer demand permanence, because you see that the dance of life and death is what makes everything beautiful. Permanence would make life static. Impermanence gives it rhythm. Dying daily, therefore, is not an act of loss. It's an act of trust. Trust that every letting go reveals something truer. Trust that life knows what to remove and what to renew. Trust that beneath every ending lies the pulse of something beginning again. When you live with that trust, even grief becomes a form of gratitude. In this state, peace no longer depends on stability. You can stand in chaos and still feel centered because you know that what can die was never truly you. The body will change, the story will shift, the people will come and go, but the awareness witnessing it all remains untouched. You no longer chase immortality. You discover you already are it. And so, the tender art of dying daily becomes not a grim philosophy, but the most loving practice of all. It's how you stay pure in a world of constant change. It's how you return to innocence, not by going backward, but by shedding everything that is not true. Each day you die a little, and each day you are born a little more free. This is the quiet secret that all spiritual traditions point toward. Freedom is not something you achieve. It's what remains when you let everything else die. And in that state, even death loses its meaning. There is only life, endlessly transforming, endlessly renewing, endlessly flowing through you. When you begin to die to each moment, something profound starts to unfold. The storms that once ruled your mind begin to lose their force. The constant noise, the inner movement that once defined your life, starts to quiet. You start sensing a deeper rhythm underneath everything, still, vast, and untouched. It's not emptiness, it's fullness without agitation. This is where another great truth of life reveals itself. Karma, the endless chain of cause and effect, doesn't demand punishment or reward. It simply resolves itself when the mind stops generating new waves. The ocean doesn't need to fight the storm. It only needs to stop reacting to the wind. When the surface stills, the depth becomes visible. Every thought, intention, and action creates movement in consciousness. This movement is karma in motion. Karma is not a system of moral accounting. It's the natural consequence of energy in action. When you act from fear, attachment, or ignorance, that energy doesn't disappear. It continues to ripple through your mind, your relationships, and even your body. It creates tendencies, emotional habits, and patterns of behavior that keep repeating until the energy behind them is understood and released. That repetition is karmic momentum, the invisible current that drives you into familiar situations again and again. This is why people often find themselves stuck in loops, repeating the same mistakes, attracting the same types of relationships, facing the same emotional struggles. It's not fate punishing them, it's unexamined energy seeking resolution. Karma is not something out there controlling you, it's the echo of your own movement within consciousness. When you understand this, you stop fearing karma and start respecting it as your greatest teacher. The process of karmic resolution begins when awareness grows. Awareness is like sunlight to these patterns. It doesn't destroy them through force, it allows them to dissolve through clarity. When you see clearly what's happening inside you, your motives, your reactions, your desires, the old unconscious movements begin to lose power. What was hidden becomes illuminated, and in that light, transformation happens naturally. This is why stillness is essential. A mind constantly in motion can't perceive its own patterns. It's only when you rest deeply in awareness that the karmic waves begin to settle. Stillness is not the absence of thought. It's the absence of identification with thought. Thoughts may continue to arise, but they no longer disturb the depth of your awareness. The ocean doesn't disappear because of waves. It simply doesn't mistake the waves for itself. When you live from that depth, karma continues to unfold, but without binding you. Events still happen, but they don't create residue. You move through life with clarity, acting from wisdom rather than reaction. The chain of cause and effect becomes transparent, no longer imprisoning you in unconscious repetition. The mind, however, fears stillness. It believes movement is life. It thinks, plans, analyzes, and interferes endlessly because it's terrified of disappearing into quiet. Yet that disappearance is precisely what allows true life to emerge. When the waves rest, the ocean reveals its vastness. In the same way, when the mind grows silent, you discover your true nature, awareness without boundary. From that state, karma begins to unwind on its own. Every unresolved pattern carries emotional energy. It stays alive because you keep feeding it through identification by saying, "This is happening to me." The moment you stop calling it mine, it starts dissolving. Stillness cleanses not by effort, but by presence. You don't need to fix the past. You only need to stop recreating it in your thoughts. When you no longer resist what has already been, its energy completes its cycle and fades naturally. To understand karmic momentum, observe how easily the mind clings to storylines. A thought appears, "I was hurt," "They betrayed me," "I failed." And before you know it, the body tenses, the emotions react, and you're pulled into a narrative that feels real. That chain reaction is karma in motion. It's not the event itself that creates bondage, but your identification with the thought about it. When you rest in stillness, the same thought can arise, but you watch it without attachment. You see it as a wave passing across the surface of awareness. It rises, peaks, and fades, leaving the ocean untouched. Karmic momentum is also collective. Humanity as a whole carries inherited patterns: fear, greed, aggression, division. These are old karmic forces repeating through societies and generations. Yet even collective karma begins to shift when individuals stop feeding those patterns inside themselves. Every time you choose stillness instead of reaction, compassion instead of anger, you stop contributing to the collective wave. Your peace becomes a quiet revolution. Stillness, then, is not withdrawal from the world. It's the most profound form of participation. The ocean of stillness doesn't mean inactivity. You still act, speak, create, and engage, but the quality of your movement changes. Action born from stillness has precision. It's not driven by ego or anxiety. It arises spontaneously from awareness, then dissolves without residue once complete. Like a ripple that fades naturally, it leaves the water clear. This kind of action is called karma yoga in spiritual traditions, action without attachment to result. It's the path that leads to freedom from karmic accumulation. When you live this way, each moment becomes self-contained. You no longer act today while dragging the burden of yesterday or the fear of tomorrow. Each action is complete in itself. This breaks the chain of continuity that keeps karma alive. The mind can only perpetuate karma when it keeps connecting past and future through thought. Stillness breaks that bridge, returning you to the eternal now, where karma resolves itself through awareness. The process of karmic dissolution can feel uncomfortable at first. Old patterns rise to the surface because they sense the end of their reign. You may feel emotional turbulence, resurfacing memories, or unexplained sadness. These are the waves purifying themselves. Do not resist them. The moment you stop judging the process, the healing accelerates. Stillness is not always peaceful in the beginning. It's often chaotic because the noise you once avoided becomes audible. But if you stay, if you allow the waves to move through without clinging, the energy exhausts itself, and the calm that follows is not temporary. It's eternal. This is the hidden secret behind meditation, prayer, and silence. They are not techniques to achieve peace. They are conditions that allow karmic motion to unwind. Every time you return to stillness, even for a few moments, you reduce the momentum of unconscious movement. Eventually, life itself becomes meditation. You walk, talk, and work from a centered awareness that no longer generates unnecessary motion. Karma becomes transparent. It moves through you, but doesn't bind you. Many people misunderstand karma as destiny, something fixed and unchangeable. But karma is fluid. It changes the moment consciousness changes. Each choice, each breath taken in awareness, rewrites your energetic pattern. When you act from stillness, you stop creating new waves. Old ones may still ripple for a while, but without new ones replacing them, the ocean naturally calms. This is why enlightened beings appear serene, not because their lives lack challenges, but because no inner resistance remains to amplify them. You can see karmic momentum in daily life. Think of a time when someone insulted you. The initial reaction may have been anger or hurt. If you resisted it or fed it, that emotion turned into a pattern. You carried it, replayed it, and projected it onto others. That's how karma multiplies. But if you had stayed still, felt the sting, and let it pass without story, the wave would have ended there. Stillness breaks the cycle by refusing to add energy to what arises. The same principle applies to desires. Every craving sends ripples through consciousness. When fulfilled, it often creates attachment. When denied, it breeds frustration. Both are forms of movement. The only desire that leads to freedom is the desire for stillness itself, the longing to rest in your natural state of being. Once you experience that depth, other desires lose their intensity. You stop seeking fulfillment in impermanent things because you found the unchanging peace beneath all experience. Karma also expresses through speech. Words are vibrations carrying intention. When spoken unconsciously, they add to karmic turbulence. But when spoken from awareness, they heal. Silence between words gives them power. In stillness, you begin to speak less, but with more truth. You listen more, understanding that communication is not about dominance, but resonance. This quiet awareness gradually purifies the energy around you, affecting others without effort. As the mind becomes quieter, you start noticing subtler layers of karma, mental habits, inherited tendencies, emotional reflexes that once seemed natural. You realize that even your sense of I is a collection of karmic impressions, constantly shifting. When awareness penetrates deeply enough, even that central sense of self begins to dissolve. What remains is pure consciousness, untouched, uncreated, free from cause and effect. This is the ocean beyond all waves. In that state, karma doesn't disappear because it's bad. It disappears because it no longer has relevance. There is no one left to carry it. Stillness reveals another truth. Karma doesn't need to be worked off. It needs to be understood. The moment you see the pattern clearly, without judgment or desire, its energy completes itself. Awareness is the great neutralizer. It's like sunlight melting frost. It doesn't struggle, it simply shines. The ocean of stillness doesn't fight the waves. It absorbs them until they are indistinguishable from its own depth. In practical terms, this means living each day with conscious presence. When you feel anger rising, you don't suppress it or act it out. You observe it. When fear surfaces, you hold it in still awareness until its charge fades. When desire pulls you, you witness the pull without condemnation. This simple act of seeing is how karma resolves itself. The wave spends its energy and returns to rest. You don't need to fix your life through endless strategies. You need to stop recreating old motion through unconscious reaction. Even physical illness can reflect karmic movement. The body often stores unresolved emotional or mental energy. When awareness penetrates deeply enough, the body begins to release it through symptoms or sensations. Healing then becomes a process of still observation rather than frantic repair. The more you rest in stillness, the more the body aligns with balance. Stillness doesn't fight disease, it creates the conditions where harmony returns naturally. Over time, the still mind becomes transparent, like glass. Karma continues to flow, but it no longer distorts perception. You see life as it is, neutral, dynamic, and interconnected. You stop labeling events as blessings or curses because you recognize them as expressions of the same movement. Some waves rise gently, others crash violently, but they're all made of water. From the depth, there's only the ocean, endlessly expressing itself. When the mind is still, forgiveness arises effortlessly. You stop blaming others because you see that every action, even the hurtful ones, comes from unconscious karmic momentum. People act out their patterns until awareness awakens in them. Understanding this doesn't excuse harm, but it releases hatred. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Stillness restores compassion by showing that everyone is caught in their own currents until they remember the ocean. This awareness also dissolves pride. When you see that your successes and failures are both waves in the same sea, you stop identifying with them. You no longer boast or despair. You simply move with grace. Life's ups and downs lose their power to define you. You remain steady, rooted in the vastness beneath the movement. That steadiness is freedom. Not freedom from experience, but freedom within it. The ocean of stillness is not something you create. It's what you return to when you stop creating waves. Every breath can be a return, every pause a reminder. You begin to notice the gap between thoughts, the silent background that never changes. That silence is your true home. Karma belongs to movement, but awareness belongs to stillness. When you live from awareness, karma may continue on the surface, but your center remains unmoved. This doesn't mean life becomes dull or passive. In fact, stillness heightens sensitivity. You start perceiving beauty in ordinary things. The sound of wind, the warmth of sunlight, the rhythm of your heartbeat. Because your mind is quiet, you experience life directly, without filters. You act more wisely, love more purely, and speak more truthfully. The ocean doesn't reject the waves. It celebrates them. You too begin to celebrate every experience as a play of consciousness on the surface of stillness. The ultimate realization is that stillness and motion are not two. The waves are the ocean expressing itself. Karma and awareness are not separate forces. They are different faces of the same intelligence. When awareness is unconscious, it becomes karma. When awareness is conscious, it becomes liberation. The transformation from movement to stillness doesn't destroy life. It reveals its depth. In the end, the ocean of stillness is what you've always been. Karma, with all its patterns and momentum, was simply the movement of that same ocean exploring itself. When the exploration is complete, when understanding ripens, the waves subside naturally. You don't have to seek stillness, you only have to stop disturbing it. This is how karma resolves itself, not through punishment or effort, but through the quiet realization that nothing was ever separate from the whole. The ocean cleanses itself by returning to what it already is, infinite, unbroken, serene. And when you live from that understanding, you too become like that ocean, vast, unshakable, untouched by the storms that once defined you. When the waves finally settle and the ocean of stillness becomes your natural home, something unexpected begins to reveal itself. You start to notice that even within stillness, life continues to move. Seasons change, people enter and leave. Joy rises and falls. Gain turns into loss, and loss returns to gain again. The rhythm never stops, and in that rhythm, a deeper truth unfolds. That existence itself is cyclical. It breathes in creation and exhales dissolution. This continuous pulse is what the ancient teachings call samsara, the endless turning of life. At first glance, it may seem like a trap, a repetition to escape from. But when awareness ripens, you see it differently. Samsara is not your prison, it's your teacher. It's the classroom of trust, teaching you to let go of both pleasure and pain, success and failure, without resistance. Everything in this world operates in cycles. The planets revolve, the seasons return, the heart beats, and the breath flows in and out. Every inhale carries life in, every exhale releases it. You are part of this cosmic rhythm. Yet the mind constantly seeks permanence. It clings to the inhale and fears the exhale. It celebrates the rising and mourns the falling. That's why suffering continues. The mind wants the wave without the trough, the day without the night, the gain without the loss. But the universe doesn't work that way. It balances itself through change. Samsara is not punishment. It's equilibrium in motion. When you begin to trust the rhythm of gain and loss, you stop fighting reality. You see that every rise contains the seed of a fall, and every fall carries within it the potential to rise again. This understanding dissolves anxiety. You no longer panic when things fade because you know they will return in another form. You stop clinging when you receive because you understand it was never meant to stay. The pendulum of life keeps swinging, and peace comes from moving with it instead of resisting its motion. The ego fears this truth because it wants control. It seeks to secure success, preserve love, and freeze happiness. But every attempt to hold life still creates suffering. The more tightly you hold, the faster things slip away. Trust begins when you allow the rhythm to move as it must. You start to see that the same intelligence guiding the ocean, the stars, and the heartbeat is guiding your life too. The apparent chaos of gain and loss is not random. It's a divine choreography teaching you to find peace in impermanence. Samsara is not something you can escape by withdrawing from the world. It's something you transcend by understanding it deeply. The cycle itself is the lesson. Each experience, joy or sorrow, success or failure, becomes a mirror reflecting your attachments. Every time you celebrate a gain too much or resist a loss too strongly, you are being shown where you still cling. Life repeats those lessons gently, then more forcefully, until you learn to stay centered amid the fluctuations. In this way, samsara is not punishment, but compassion, the universe patiently guiding you towards surrender. This is why even enlightened beings continue to experience the ups and downs of existence. The difference is in how they relate to it. To them, gain and loss are like weather patterns, transient and neutral. They don't confuse sunshine with reward or rain with curse. Both are necessary for balance. When you live this way, life stops feeling like a series of problems to solve and starts feeling like a sacred rhythm to participate in. Trust is the heart of this lesson. Trust that every loss has a purpose. Trust that every gain carries responsibility. Trust that life knows what it's doing even when you can't see its logic. The mind always wants reasons, but the soul understands through silence. Trust means stepping beyond explanation and resting in direct experience, knowing that what comes is right for now, and what leaves was never meant to stay longer. Most people think of samsara as suffering, but that's only true when you resist it. When you stop resisting, samsara becomes wisdom. Each cycle of pain and relief, failure and growth refines your awareness. Like a blacksmith's fire, it melts the impurities of attachment, pride and fear until only pure presence remains. You start to see that even your most painful experiences were never mistakes. They were purification. They burned away what was false so that truth could shine through. The cycles of life are not linear. They spiral. Each return brings you deeper insight. You may encounter similar challenges again, but you meet them differently because your consciousness has expanded. The repetition is not regression, it's refinement. Life doesn't test you to break you, it tests you to strengthen your capacity for trust. Every time you meet change without clinging, you break a link in the chain of samsara. Trust in this context doesn't mean blind optimism. It's not pretending everything is perfect. It's understanding that even imperfection serves evolution. When things fall apart, trust reminds you that nothing real can be destroyed. When you lose something dear, trust whispers that space is being made for something new. When you face failure, trust teaches you humility, the kind that grounds wisdom in compassion. Every attachment is an anchor that keeps you tied to the wheel of samsara. The more you cling to how things should be, the more you spin in frustration. But when you release expectation, you step off the wheel and into awareness. Life still moves, but you no longer mistake movement for instability. You see that motion is not chaos, it's vitality. The flower blooms and withers, the sun rises and sets, and in that endless rhythm, existence remains complete. Loss often feels personal, but it's simply the flow of transformation. What leaves your life is not punishment. It's the universe rearranging energy to serve growth. When you resist loss, you stagnate. When you allow it, you evolve. The truth is that nothing ever truly disappears. It only changes form. The friend who leaves, the job that ends, the phase that concludes, all dissolve into something unseen, waiting to re-emerge differently. To trust samsara is to trust continuity beyond appearances. The cycles also teach compassion. When you see how fragile gain and loss truly are, you stop judging others for where they stand in the rhythm. You understand that everyone is somewhere on their spiral, rising, falling, learning, returning. Compassion arises naturally because you recognize your reflection in them. Today's success could be tomorrow's struggle. Today's struggle could be tomorrow's success. The separation between fortunate and unfortunate fades. You begin to treat everyone with gentleness, knowing how fluid life really is. This trust also changes your relationship with time. The mind often panics when things don't happen quickly, but samsara teaches patience. You begin to see that every delay has timing behind it. Every pause carries preparation. What seems like stagnation is often unseen movement beneath the surface. Seeds germinate in darkness before they bloom. Trusting the cycle means accepting that life unfolds at its own pace, never early, never late. As awareness deepens, you stop identifying with the temporary highs and lows. You experience joy fully, but don't cling to it. You endure pain with dignity, but don't make it your identity. You remain centered in the stillness beneath movement. This is not indifference, it's freedom. Indifference avoids feeling. Freedom feels everything without being enslaved by it. You begin to participate in life like a dancer who moves with the music, but is not trapped by any single note. The ego resists this understanding because it thrives on drama. It defines itself through contrast, success against failure, love against loss. Without fluctuation, it feels invisible. But as you grow in awareness, you realize that what you are doesn't depend on gain or loss. You are the space through which both occur. The wheel of samsara spins within you, not around you. You stop chasing stability in the outer world because you've found it within. The beauty of samsara as a teacher is that it uses everything, pleasure, pain, chaos, calm, to bring you home. Nothing is wasted. The moments you call setbacks are often redirections. The relationships that end teach you the kind of love that doesn't cling. The failures that sting carve humility, the most fertile ground for wisdom. The achievements that fade remind you that meaning is never in the result, but in the awareness that experiences it. To truly learn from samsara, you must stop dividing life into good and bad. Both are part of the same current. Gain is expansion, loss is purification. One fills the cup, the other empties it, so it can be filled again. The mind calls this instability, the soul calls it balance. When you accept both sides equally, you reach equanimity, a steady peace that doesn't depend on circumstance. This peace doesn't mean passivity. It means living fully, giving your all, while knowing you don't own the outcome. You work with dedication, love with openness, create with passion, and when it's time to release, you release without bitterness. That's what trust looks like in action. Wholehearted participation without attachment. When you live like this, every experience becomes sacred. You stop asking life to favor you and start allowing it to move through you. Samsara also teaches humility through impermanence. When things go well, it reminds you not to become arrogant. When things collapse, it reminds you not to despair. Both conditions are temporary. You realize that true wisdom lies in balance. Neither pride nor self-pity, only awareness. The one who remains steady amid both victory and defeat has discovered the secret of peace. To deepen this trust, you must observe how the mind reacts during change. When gain arrives, notice the fear of losing it. When loss comes, notice the longing for its return. Both fears are the same, the fear of impermanence. Trust dissolves that fear by revealing that change doesn't destroy life, it renews it. Without loss, growth would stop. Without endings, nothing new could begin. The cycle of samsara is not a flaw. It's the heartbeat of evolution. As you mature spiritually, gratitude begins to replace resistance. You start thanking life not only for blessings, but also for challenges. You understand that pain sharpens perception, uncertainty deepens faith, and endings open doors that comfort would have kept closed. Gratitude is how you honor samsara. It's the acknowledgement that everything, even chaos, serves awakening. Eventually, this trust extends beyond personal experience to the collective. You start seeing the world's turmoil, political, environmental, social, as part of a vast evolutionary cycle. Humanity too moves through samsara, learning through its mistakes, breaking attachments to power, identity, and division. When you trust this process, you stop feeding despair. You start contributing peace instead of panic. Your inner steadiness becomes your offering to a restless world. The cycles also refine your understanding of love. True love is not born from clinging, it thrives in freedom. Samsara teaches you that love matures through separation as much as through union. You stop seeking love that stays and start cherishing love that transforms. You learn that those who come into your life, even briefly, leave imprints that shape your awakening. You don't mourn their departure, you bless it. Love becomes expansive, not possessive, a force that grows through giving, not keeping. Samsara's greatest lesson is that nothing is wasted. Every joy polishes your heart. Every sorrow opens it wider. Each rise teaches appreciation. Each fall teaches surrender. When you view life this way, trust becomes natural because you see how perfectly the rhythm works. The universe doesn't make mistakes. It creates meaning through movement. At the end of this understanding, you no longer crave escape from samsara. You see that liberation doesn't mean leaving the world, but seeing through its illusion of opposites. Gain and loss lose their polarity. They become two expressions of the same energy. You begin to live beyond duality, resting in the awareness that observes both without preference. This is freedom within motion, stillness inside the turning wheel. When you reach that depth, the world no longer feels like a series of random events. It becomes a sacred teaching disguised as ordinary life. Every moment, pleasant or painful, whispers the same message. Let go, trust, and return to balance. Samsara becomes your greatest guru, patiently guiding you back to the truth that peace was never found in clinging to gain or resisting loss. It was always found in the space between them, the still awareness that watches the cycle with love and never forgets its own eternal calm. In this realization, trust becomes more than a practice. It becomes your nature. You move through life with open hands, giving and receiving with equal grace. You stop chasing permanence in a temporary world. You stop fearing endings because you see beginnings waiting behind them, and you start living as what you've always been. Awareness, resting in motion, silence, dancing within sound, eternity, breathing through every rise and fall. That is the teaching of samsara, not a wheel to escape, but a rhythm to trust. And when you truly trust it, the wheel no longer binds you. It turns, but you stand still at the center, free in every direction. When you begin to trust the turning of samsara, when gain and loss no longer shake your center, a subtle truth starts to emerge. Even in balance, even in flow, something remains unfinished. Every joy carries a trace of longing. Every achievement leaves space for more. Every answer opens new questions. Life never closes its circle the way the mind hopes it will. There is always something unresolved, something still unfolding. At first, this seems unfair, as though peace depends on things finally coming together. But as awareness matures, you see that incompletion itself is part of life's design. The unfinished is not a mistake. It's where growth continues, where movement breathes, where the mystery stays alive. The human mind has an unending hunger for closure. It wants conclusions, clean endings, clear explanations. It wants the story to make perfect sense. Yet the truth is that no story ever really ends. It simply transforms into another. When one chapter closes, another begins before the ink is dry. Life refuses to be boxed into neat conclusions because evolution never stops. The need for completion comes from the ego's desire for control, the hope that if everything is settled, you can finally relax. But peace doesn't arrive through finishing. It arrives through acceptance of the unfinished. This is why even after great success or deep awakening, there remains an awareness that something more can unfold. That doesn't mean what you have is lacking. It means existence itself is open-ended. The moment you try to lock life into certainty, it slips away. The unfinished keeps you humble. It reminds you that you're a participant in an infinite unfolding, not the author of its end. Look closely at how life teaches this lesson. The tree never says, "I have grown enough." It keeps reaching toward the sky, expanding, shedding, and renewing. The river doesn't stop flowing because it has traveled far. It merges into greater currents. The sky never finishes creating new clouds. Nature thrives because it never seeks completion. It simply expresses the next stage of becoming. You are no different. The longing for things to be finally done is the mind's illusion that completion equals safety. But completion would mean stagnation, and stagnation is death disguised as peace. The wisdom of the unfinished is that perfection is found not in finality, but in continuous transformation. Peace does not depend on resolution. It arises from the ability to rest within the unresolved. Every incomplete moment, every open question, every pause between endings and beginnings is where awareness deepens. When you stop demanding that life complete itself according to your schedule, you begin to experience the vast stillness underneath its motion, a peace that doesn't need answers to exist. This understanding changes how you relate to every area of life. In relationships, you stop expecting closure from others. No perfect apology, no final understanding. You begin to see that love itself is a process of constant evolution. People change, connections shift, and even separation carries continuation in unseen ways. When you accept that relationships don't end neatly, you release resentment. You understand that even silence between two souls can be part of their ongoing dialogue in the fabric of existence. In your work or purpose, the unfinished teaches patience. There will always be more to do, more to learn, more to refine. The illusion of arriving only breeds exhaustion because it's built on the idea that satisfaction lies in completion. True fulfillment comes from presence, not perfection. You pour yourself fully into what's before you, not because you expect it to be final, but because each act becomes complete in itself. The work never ends, yet every moment of it holds wholeness when met with full awareness. The mind struggles with this because it measures life in results. It wants to know when the healing will be over, when the confusion will end, when enlightenment will arrive. But life doesn't work in straight lines. Growth happens in spirals, revisiting old lessons, deepening understanding, returning to familiar feelings with new insight. The unfinished is not failure, it's continuity. Each return gives you a chance to see what you couldn't before. To live peacefully with open-endedness, you must let go of the fantasy that one day everything will make perfect sense. Clarity comes and goes. There are seasons of understanding and seasons of mystery, just as there are seasons of light and shadow. The heart matures not by finding all the answers, but by resting comfortably in the presence of questions. The wisest people are not those who have concluded, but those who have learned to stay curious. The unfinished also plays a role in creativity. Every artist, writer, or thinker knows that no work is ever truly done. Even the final stroke or sentence is simply a pause, a temporary rest in the rhythm of expression. There's always more that could be added or changed, but at some point the artist must release it, not because it's complete, but because it has reached the end of its current form. Life is like that, always reaching the end of one form so it can begin another. The wisdom lies in knowing when to stop forcing completion and start allowing evolution. When you begin to live this way, peace arises naturally because you stop measuring progress against imagined perfection. You start finding beauty in process rather than product. The flower that hasn't bloomed yet is as sacred as the one in full bloom because both are part of the same cycle. The unfinished conversation, the unfulfilled dream, the unresolved emotion, all are threads in a larger tapestry that you can't yet see in full. Trust that the pattern is perfect, even if your eyes only glimpse a fragment. This acceptance requires humility. It means admitting that you may never understand everything, that your mind's perspective is limited. But within that humility lies deep peace. When you stop demanding total understanding, you free yourself from constant tension. You start to sense the intelligence operating beyond comprehension, a wisdom that knows when to reveal and when to withhold. Not every truth needs to be known immediately. Some truths mature slowly, like fruit ripening in the sun. The unfinished also invites compassion. When you see that everyone's life is in progress, that no one has fully figured it out, you stop judging so harshly. You recognize that we are all works in progress, moving through lessons at our own pace. This recognition softens the heart. It allows patience, forgiveness, and genuine empathy to grow. You stop expecting others to be complete before you can accept them. Love becomes unconditional because it no longer depends on perfection. There is also beauty in realizing that the unfinished keeps love alive. If everything could be fully known, mystery would vanish, and with it, the wonder that keeps love expanding. The unknown is what invites exploration, intimacy, and discovery. In the same way, life's unfinished nature keeps your spirit alive, always reaching, always deepening. The mind seeks closure, but the soul thrives in curiosity. The unfinished is the open door through which new wisdom enters. You begin to notice this pattern everywhere. The sunset fades, leaving the sky halfway between night and light. Music ends with a lingering note that never quite resolves. The heart pauses between beats. Even breath, the most constant rhythm of your existence, is a dance of incomplete cycles. You inhale, exhale, and yet the next breath is always waiting. That's life, reminding you that peace doesn't live in finality, but in the continuous movement between states. Many people resist this truth because they equate incompletion with failure. They think, if I were truly enlightened, truly healed, truly successful, everything would be finished. But awakening doesn't end the unfolding. It transforms your relationship to it. You still experience uncertainty, change, and desire, but without the ache of grasping. You see that perfection was never the goal. The goal was awareness, and awareness never ends because it keeps expanding. The wisdom of the unfinished also frees you from regret. You stop wishing the past had been different because you realize it's still teaching you. Nothing is permanently closed. Even past experiences continue to evolve through your understanding of them. Every time you view them with new awareness, you transform their energy. The story may not change, but your relationship to it does. and that's where healing lives. In the same way, the future loses its heaviness. You stop demanding that it deliver completion. You understand that the future, too, is an unfolding present that never arrives as expected. The best preparation for tomorrow is not control, but openness. When you accept the unfinished, you live with readiness, not tension, but alert peace. You stop waiting for someday because every day is part of the becoming. This understanding reshapes even your spirituality. You no longer chase enlightenment as a finish line. You see it as an ever-deepening intimacy with the now. Each realization is both ending and beginning. Each insight dissolves old ignorance but opens new dimensions of awareness. The more you awaken, the more you see that awakening has no final stage. Consciousness is infinite. There is always further to expand. The unfinished is not imperfection. It's infinity expressing itself. Living this truth brings immense relief. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to fix everything. You stop waiting for life to become perfectly stable before you can relax. You learn to rest amid uncertainty because you know that completion is not peace. Acceptance is. You may still plan, build, and strive, but now you do it from calm curiosity instead of anxious need. You can hold goals lightly, knowing that even if they evolve or dissolve, your peace remains untouched. When you live from this awareness, gratitude deepens. You begin to thank life not just for what's finished, but for what's still becoming. You start appreciating the half-formed, the incomplete, the yet-to-be understood. You realize that beauty exists most vividly in transition, the dawn before full light, the melody before resolution, the silence between words. You stop rushing through the unfinished because you see it as sacred ground where life is most alive. This also transforms your relationship with waiting. Waiting is no longer emptiness. It becomes a form of participation. It's the quiet trust that something meaningful is still forming beyond your view. You learn to wait without frustration because you know that life's timing doesn't obey human impatience. The unfinished is life's way of keeping you engaged with wonder. Every time you think something is incomplete, pause and look closer. Often, what you call unfinished is simply evolving in unseen ways. Life continues its work, even when you can't witness it. A seed underground may look inactive, but transformation is happening beneath the soil. The wisdom of the unfinished is knowing that unseen growth is still growth. Patience becomes faith, and faith becomes peace. The acceptance of open-endedness also dissolves the illusion of control. When you stop demanding closure, you begin to see that life unfolds perfectly, even without your interference. The universe doesn't need your certainty, it only needs your participation. You begin to trust the unknown as part of the design. This trust is not naive. It's the quiet strength that comes from direct experience. You've seen that forcing endings brings exhaustion, but allowing the unfinished brings ease. Over time, this understanding turns into a way of being. You start approaching each moment with gentleness, knowing it's both complete and incomplete. Complete because it holds everything it needs right now. Incomplete because it will evolve into something new. This paradox is the essence of peace, the ability to feel whole while still unfolding. The wisdom of the unfinished is the wisdom of maturity. It replaces impatience with serenity, expectation with gratitude, striving with still participation. It teaches that peace isn't what happens when life fulfills your plans. Peace is what blooms when you stop demanding that it should. The unfinished isn't a flaw. It's the very texture of existence. It keeps the world alive, creative, and full of possibility. When you surrender to this truth, you begin to see life as an ongoing masterpiece. You stop waiting for the final brushstroke because you realize it will never come. And that's the beauty of it. The artwork is alive because it's unfinished. You are alive because you are unfinished. Every breath adds to the painting. Every experience deepens its color. And somewhere beyond comprehension, the unseen artist, the intelligence of life itself, continues to paint with love, knowing that the perfection of creation lies not in its completion, but in its eternal becoming. When you begin to live in peace with the unfinished, something deeper starts to call you. Beneath the constant flow of events, beneath the endless forming and dissolving of things, there's a subtle pull, not toward more answers, but toward stillness. After all the searching, striving, and understanding, life starts whispering that it's time to be quiet. This is the stage where words begin to lose their meaning, and silence becomes the teacher. Not the silence of absence or emptiness, but the silence that hums beneath everything, the one that reveals what effort and speech never could. Silence is not the opposite of sound. It's the space that holds sound. Just as the sky allows clouds to pass, silence allows thought, emotion, and expression to move without resistance. It doesn't judge or interfere. It simply is. That's why silence is the purest form of surrender, because it doesn't argue with reality. It doesn't try to fix, defend, or define. It receives everything as it is, without distortion. The more you rest in that silence, the more you begin to sense that it has been there all along, quietly holding every experience you've ever had. Most people mistake silence for nothingness, but in truth, silence is fullness, the presence behind all appearances. When the mind grows quiet, you start to hear the subtle rhythm of existence itself. Words divide, silence unites. Thoughts analyze, silence understands. Effort manipulates, silence allows. This is why the masters of every tradition eventually lead their students into stillness. Because there comes a point where knowledge must dissolve into direct awareness. In daily life, silence begins as an outer practice. You withdraw from noise, distraction, and constant stimulation. You give yourself space to listen, not just to the world, but to what lives beneath it. The modern mind is addicted to activity. It fills every gap with sound, scrolling, conversation, and planning. But silence frightens it, because silence exposes what's hidden. When there is no noise, you start to meet yourself. All the emotions, memories, and unprocessed energy you've buried begin to rise. This is why silence can feel uncomfortable at first. It removes your escape routes. Yet, this confrontation is healing, because what rises in stillness is what's ready to be released. As silence deepens, it starts to move inward. You begin to notice that internal noise is louder than external noise. Thoughts chatter constantly, trying to narrate, justify, and control. But awareness doesn't need to argue with thoughts. It only needs to observe them. As you learn to rest in observation, thoughts lose their authority. They continue to appear, but they no longer dictate your state. This is the beginning of true surrender, when you stop believing every thought that passes and allow them to dissolve into the vast quiet behind them. In this inner silence, the illusion of control begins to crumble. You see that most of your life has been driven by the need to manage what cannot be managed, to force outcomes, to defend opinions, to maintain identities. But silence teaches a different strength, the ability to allow. It doesn't mean you stop acting. It means your actions come from alignment rather than anxiety. You move when life moves you, speak when truth speaks through you, and rest when silence calls you inward. This natural rhythm replaces the exhausting effort of trying to make everything happen your way. External silence, the pause before you respond, the moment of listening instead of interrupting, creates space for truth to emerge. Most conversations are not exchanges of understanding, but battles of ego. Each person defends their position, waiting for their turn to speak. True communication happens only when one person becomes silent enough to really hear. Silence doesn't mean absence of words, it means presence in words. When you speak from inner stillness, your words carry weight because they arise from clarity, not reaction. The more you practice silence, the more sensitive you become to noise, not just audible noise, but energetic noise. You start noticing the tension in conversations, the chaos in environments, the heaviness in constant talking. Silence sharpens perception. You can feel when something is forced, when words are empty, when speech is a mask for insecurity. You no longer crave endless dialogue. You crave authenticity. Silence becomes your inner compass, helping you sense what is real. Surrender through silence doesn't mean withdrawal from life. It's the opposite. It allows you to engage more deeply because you're no longer reacting blindly. You listen to life the way a musician listens to music, sensing pauses, tones, and shifts in rhythm. Silence reveals timing. It shows you when to step forward and when to step back. It aligns you with the natural intelligence that operates through everything. When you move from silence, your actions become precise, graceful, and effective because they arise from presence, not panic. In silence, you also begin to experience time differently. The mind divides life into past and future, constantly replaying or anticipating. But silence draws you into the eternal now, the space where everything happens, but nothing is rushed. You stop chasing meaning because meaning reveals itself in the stillness. Each moment becomes whole. The need to fill time disappears because you realize that time itself is just movement within timeless awareness. Silence also purifies emotion. When you stop expressing emotions impulsively through talking, complaining, or dramatizing, you give them room to reveal their roots. Anger, when observed in silence, often reveals sadness beneath it. Sadness, when held gently, often reveals love. Silence acts like sunlight on ice. It melts the surface so that what's hidden beneath can flow freely. Through silence, even pain becomes sacred because it transforms into wisdom when no longer resisted. The surrender found in silence is not passive, it's receptive. It's an openness that allows life to teach you directly. Words often limit understanding because they categorize experience. Silence lets understanding arise from within. You start knowing without thinking, a form of intuitive clarity that transcends logic. Decisions made from this inner quiet tend to be right not because they follow rules, but because they flow with the underlying intelligence of existence. As silence deepens, the boundaries between inner and outer start to fade. You begin to sense the same stillness in the world around you, in the space between sounds, in the pause between breaths, in the calm under movement. You realize that silence isn't something you create, it's something you remember. It has always been there, waiting behind the noise. This recognition changes everything because it reveals that silence is not an experience. It's your essence. You are the silence through which thoughts, words, and sensations appear. This awareness brings profound humility. You stop claiming ownership over wisdom or insight. You recognize that truth doesn't belong to anyone. It arises from silence itself. The greatest teachers are silent not because they lack words, but because they understand that words are only pointers. Silence carries the essence of what words can't hold. The deepest communication between souls often happens without speech, through presence, through eyes, through still understanding. Silence also reshapes your relationship with spirituality. Many seekers fill their path with mantras, theories, and endless discussions about enlightenment. But true realization happens when the talking stops and direct awareness takes over. In the silence of surrender, the seeker dissolves into what is sought. There is no one left to achieve, only the recognition that what you were looking for was never separate from you. This is why great masters often end their teachings with silence, because the final truth can only be felt, not spoken. In relationships, silence becomes healing. When you stop needing to fill every moment with conversation, you create space for genuine connection. Sometimes the most intimate moments happen in quiet, when you sit beside someone without words, sharing presence rather than stories. That stillness allows love to breathe. It strips away pretense and reveals the raw simplicity of being together. Silence becomes the language of authenticity, one that says more than any phrase could express. Through silence, even conflict transforms. Instead of reacting immediately, you pause. The pause breaks the chain of reactivity. It allows awareness to enter the space where habit once ruled. You begin to see that most arguments are fueled not by the situation, but by the ego's need to defend itself. Silence disarms that need. It reminds you that you don't have to win, you only have to stay present. From that presence, wise words or compassionate actions emerge naturally. The silence of surrender also teaches you the art of listening to intuition. Intuition doesn't shout, it whispers. The noise of constant thought drowns it out. But in silence, you begin to sense subtle guidance, a feeling, a pull, a knowing that doesn't come from reasoning. This is life communicating directly with you. Trusting these silent signals is how you align with the flow of reality. When you act from them, synchronicities appear, doors open effortlessly, and challenges unfold with grace. Over time, silence changes your nervous system. The constant chatter of the mind keeps the body tense, ready to react. But deep silence soothes the entire being. The breath slows, the heartbeat steadies, the senses sharpen. You feel grounded, yet spacious, alert, yet calm. It's not just mental peace, it's physiological harmony. This is why silent retreats and meditation practices bring such profound healing. They reset the natural balance that noise has disrupted. The more you live from silence, the less you depend on external validation. You stop needing others to confirm your worth or understand your path. You become anchored in an inner peace that doesn't fluctuate with opinions or outcomes. This independence is not isolation, it's freedom. You can love deeply without fear of rejection, work passionately without craving recognition, and move through uncertainty without panic. Silence gives you stability because it roots you in something unchanging. It also transforms your experience of solitude. What once felt like loneliness becomes nourishment. Solitude in silence is not absence of company. It's communion with existence. You begin to feel connected to everything, even when alone. The same silence within you hums in the trees, in the air, in the spaces between stars. You realize you've never been separate. Loneliness fades because connection was never external. It was the quiet thread linking all things. This surrender through silence naturally dissolves fear. Fear is born from noise, from stories the mind tells about what could go wrong. In silence, those stories lose power because they depend on thought. When thought stops, fear has no soil to grow in. What remains is presence. Alert, open, alive. From that state, you meet life directly, not through anticipation or memory. Fear may still appear, but it passes quickly because you no longer feed it with words. Eventually, silence becomes not just a practice, but your way of being. You speak less, yet say more. You act less, yet accomplish more. You need less, yet feel more complete. Silence simplifies life because it removes the unnecessary explanations, arguments, and ambitions. What remains is essence, pure experience unfolding without interference. When you live this way, you realize that surrender doesn't mean weakness. It means resting in the intelligence that governs everything. The mind believes it must control, but silence shows that control was never real. Life has always been moving perfectly without your management. Surrender is not defeat. It's alignment with what already is. In that alignment, peace arises naturally, effortlessly, like still water reflecting the sky. Silence also reveals that everything sacred has always spoken quietly. The heart doesn't shout its wisdom. It whispers. The truth doesn't arrive through argument. It appears in still awareness. The divine doesn't demand attention. It waits in silence, patient and eternal. When you learn to be silent, you finally begin to hear what has been speaking softly all along. And so, silence becomes your refuge and your teacher. It doesn't remove life's movement. It reveals the stillness beneath it. It doesn't silence sound. It gives it context. It doesn't erase you. It returns you to your original clarity. In surrendering to silence, you stop seeking control because you see that control was the noise that kept you from hearing the truth. The journey that began with letting go now completes itself in quiet. The river of thoughts, desires, and explanations finally flows back into the ocean of stillness it came from. And in that vast, wordless peace, You discover what no philosophy, no effort, no reasoning could ever reveal, that you were never separate from life at all. You were always the silence listening beneath it, the stillness holding it, the awareness through which everything arises and returns. This is the secret of silence as surrender. It doesn't give you control. It frees you from needing it. And in that freedom, life becomes what it was always meant to be: simple, clear, and profoundly whole. As silence begins to deepen within you, something extraordinary starts to happen. Life itself starts to speak in ways you could never hear before. The whispers of intuition grow louder, coincidences begin to align, and even the events you once called unwanted start to reveal a strange perfection. The noise of resistance fades, and suddenly you can see everything that has arrived uninvited, everything that disrupted your plans, carries its own secret blessing. It takes time to see this clearly, but once you do, you realize that the unchosen moments were not detours, they were directions. What enters your life without permission often enters to awaken something that your comfort would never touch. We spend much of our lives trying to shape reality into something predictable, something controllable. We plan, calculate, and dream, hoping to design our way out of pain and surprise. But the truth is, life doesn't obey the script of our preferences. It doesn't consult us before unfolding. Some of its most transformative gifts come wrapped in the disguise of loss, rejection, or chaos. What we resist as misfortune often turns out to be mercy wearing unfamiliar clothes. When silence teaches you to stop arguing with what is, you begin to see that the unchosen is not your enemy. It's your hidden ally. The blessing of the unchosen reveals itself only after surrender. As long as the mind is shouting, "This shouldn't have happened," awareness can't see the wisdom behind it. But the moment you soften into acceptance, understanding begins to rise quietly, like dawn after a long night. The heart realizes that the events you didn't want have been shaping you into who you're meant to be. Pain refines perception, loss deepens gratitude, and detours uncover dimensions of yourself that peace never could. The human ego believes happiness depends on choice, that if we could just make the right decisions, everything would fall into place. Yet the greatest moments of growth are rarely the result of choice. They're born from surrender. Think of the turning points in your life, the heartbreaks, the failures, the illnesses, the endings. You didn't choose them, yet they changed you in ways nothing else could. They stripped away illusions, shattered attachments, and forced you to discover strength you didn't know you had. That is the blessing of the unchosen. It delivers you to yourself. When you look back with awakened eyes, you start to see a pattern. How what once broke you, built you. How what left you empty made space for something truer. Every disappointment was a doorway. Every loss, a lesson in disguise. The universe does not waste anything. What arrives is necessary. What leaves is complete. The mind resists this truth because it wants control, but the heart, when quiet, recognizes the deeper harmony. It knows that even pain has its timing, its sacred function, its hidden grace. To live in harmony with this truth is to stop dividing life into good and bad, wanted and unwanted. It is to understand that everything serves evolution, though not everything serves comfort. The events you didn't choose are often the ones that pull you out of stagnation. They disrupt your illusions of safety and force you to grow beyond what is familiar. Without those shocks, you would remain asleep in routine. The unchosen events are life's way of reminding you that transformation cannot happen inside comfort. In silence, you begin to hear the subtle intelligence behind these moments. You notice how the things that seemed cruel at the time eventually revealed compassion. The job that ended opened a new path aligned with your real calling. The love that left made room for a deeper connection with yourself. The illness that slowed you down taught you what truly matters. Grace hides in the folds of what feels unbearable. The task is not to seek suffering, but to stop rejecting what it brings. When you learn to meet the unchosen with openness, resistance softens. The mind stops saying, "Why me?" and begins asking, "What is this teaching me?" That single shift turns pain into wisdom. The event itself doesn't change, but your relationship to it transforms completely. What was once a wound becomes a window. Awareness expands, compassion grows, and life begins to feel less like an accident and more like an intricate design. The blessing of the unchosen also humbles the ego's arrogance. It reminds you that you are not the master architect of existence. You participate, you influence, but you don't control. There is a larger intelligence weaving through every detail of your story, something that knows more than your preferences ever could. When you begin to trust that intelligence, you relax. You stop trying to force your way through every obstacle and start learning from it instead. Life ceases to be an opponent to outsmart and becomes a teacher to listen to. This doesn't mean passivity. It means intelligent cooperation with what arises. When life closes a door, you don't bang on it endlessly. You pause, listen, and look for the open one nearby. You act not from fear, but from attunement. The more you accept what you didn't choose, the clearer you become about what you can choose wisely. Acceptance doesn't erase effort. It purifies it. It removes the agitation that distorts perception and lets action emerge from clarity rather than desperation. The blessing of the unchosen also reshapes your understanding of timing. Often, when things don't go according to plan, frustration builds because you assume delay means denial. But sometimes what you call delay is divine protection. What you wanted wasn't denied. It was deferred until you were ready to receive it with wisdom rather than attachment. The universe works in rhythms that are not yours to dictate. To trust this is to align yourself with peace even when outcomes are unclear. Every unchosen moment carries a mirror. It reflects the parts of yourself that still cling, the expectations that still bind you, the fears that still whisper in the dark. The more you meet those reflections without running, the freer you become. The event itself is just the trigger. The true transformation happens inside. The external loss points you toward the internal attachment. Once you see it, you can release it, and that release is liberation. Silence helps you hear the unchosen differently. When you stop filling your pain with explanations, excuses, or blame, you allow the raw truth to emerge. Sometimes, the blessing isn't in understanding why something happened, but in allowing it to happen without closing your heart. You may never know why certain doors shut or why certain storms came, but you can still find grace in how you walk through them. That grace is your strength. The Unchosen also reveals the limits of willpower. We are taught to believe that everything depends on effort, that determination can bend life to our will. But there are moments when no amount of effort changes the outcome. In those moments, surrender becomes the only path to peace. The will surrenders not in defeat, but in recognition. Recognition that life moves through a vast intelligence beyond calculation. The Unchosen humbles the will into wisdom. As awareness deepens, you begin to see that the Unchosen is not random. It is precision beyond comprehension. Every event you didn't want arrives carrying exactly the lesson you most need. Sometimes it teaches patience, sometimes empathy, sometimes faith. Each one chisels the rough edges of the self until only truth remains. What looks like destruction from one angle is refinement from another. The Unchosen sculpts you into the shape of your own potential. When you stop labeling experiences as mistakes, you discover that even the detours have direction. The heartbreak that seemed senseless years ago now looks like the bridge that led you to authenticity. The loss that felt unbearable gave birth to compassion. The rejection that crushed your ego saved your soul. The pattern is always visible in hindsight, but silence trains you to sense it even in the moment, to trust that purpose is already present, even if unseen. The blessing of the Unchosen also softens the heart toward others. When you've been broken open by life's unpredictability, you stop demanding perfection from anyone else. You understand that everyone is carrying their own unchosen weight, the grief, the disappointment, the lessons they never asked for. Compassion grows not from philosophy, but from shared fragility. The Unchosen unites humanity more deeply than success ever could. This understanding also liberates you from regret. You realize that even your so-called wrong choices were never wasted. The outcomes you didn't anticipate still served your evolution. Life is not a test with failing grades. It's a journey of unfolding awareness. The blessing of the Unchosen is that it frees you from the illusion that you could have done it all perfectly. It replaces regret with reverence. Reverence for the mysterious intelligence that uses everything, even mistakes, as material for awakening. To find grace in the Unchosen, you must learn to see beyond appearances. The mind sees fragments. Awareness sees wholeness. The mind says, this shouldn't be happening. Awareness says, this is also part of the path. The more you live from awareness, the more life reveals its symmetry. Pain and peace are not opposites, but partners in awakening. Every uninvited event pushes you deeper into the center where peace cannot be disturbed. The Unchosen also strips away pretense. When life removes what you thought defined you, it reveals what cannot be taken, your essence. Status, possessions, relationships, achievements, all these are transient roles. The Unchosen tears them down, sometimes painfully, so that what is eternal can shine through. What remains after loss is what's real. Every shedding brings you closer to that truth. In time, you begin to welcome even the uninvited with quiet gratitude. You may not enjoy it, but you trust it. You stop asking life to spare you from discomfort and start asking it to teach you through it. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you resilient. You no longer break under change because you've stopped expecting permanence. You meet each moment as a teacher, not a threat. That shift is liberation disguised as surrender. The blessing of the unchosen is also the birth of humility. It reminds you that no matter how wise or strong you become, life will always know more. It keeps you teachable, open, and curious. It prevents the arrogance of thinking you've mastered existence. Every unexpected turn brings you back to beginner's mind, the state of openness that allows grace to flow freely. This perspective transforms even grief. Grief no longer feels like punishment, but like purification. When someone or something leaves, it tears open space in the heart. That space hurts, but it also allows more light to enter. You start to see that the pain of losing is not separate from the beauty of loving. The unchosen ending becomes a reminder that nothing real is ever lost, only transformed. The more deeply you understand this, the more peaceful you become in uncertainty. You stop resisting life's improvisation. You start to trust its choreography. You realize that the story doesn't need to go your way for it to be meaningful. Every chapter, chosen or not, carries its own sacred necessity. You no longer need to control the script. You only need to stay awake as it unfolds. Through this awakening, gratitude begins to replace resistance, even in difficulty. You start thanking life for what it takes as much as for what it gives. You see that both are part of the same generosity, one offering expansion through joy, the other through release. Gratitude for the unchosen is the highest form of trust. It says, "I may not understand, but I accept that this too is love in disguise." Over time, the fear of the unknown fades. The unknown no longer feels threatening because you've learned that the unchosen often holds the most sacred gifts. You stop treating uncertainty as danger and start treating it as sacred space, the field where grace works unseen. You move through life lighter, freer, and more available to wonder, because you've realized that control was never the source of safety. Trust was. And finally, the blessing of the unchosen reveals its deepest truth, that nothing truly unchosen exists. Everything, even what you never asked for, is part of the larger intelligence that includes you. The separation between what you chose and what you didn't was only a perception created by the mind. From the view of awareness, it's all one movement. Life choosing through you and for you, endlessly guiding you home to itself. When you understand this, peace becomes unconditional. You stop fighting with the past, you stop fearing the future, and you start walking with an open heart through every moment. The uninvited becomes the beloved, the unchosen becomes the sacred teacher, and life, in all its unpredictability, becomes the greatest expression of grace you could ever receive. When you begin to see the hidden blessings inside what you never chose, a quiet strength starts to take root within you. You stop reacting from fear and start responding from trust. Every twist in your path begins to look less like an accident and more like part of a larger intelligence moving through your life. Yet, even with this understanding, there remains one final illusion to dissolve: the belief that resistance is strength. In truth, the opposite is real. The power that transforms everything is not found in resistance, but in non-resistance, a calm active faith that allows life to flow through you without distortion. Non-resistance does not mean giving up or becoming passive. It means aligning with the intelligence that governs all things instead of opposing it. It is the quiet conviction that you do not need to fight reality to be free. When you stop fighting, you don't lose power, you gain clarity. You begin to act not from reaction, but from deep harmony with what already is. This kind of trust is the highest form of strength because it cannot be shaken by circumstance. Resistance comes from fear, the fear that life might not give you what you want, that things will fall apart unless you control them. It tightens the body, narrows the mind, and creates suffering out of what could have been peace. Resistance turns every change into an enemy. It demands that life follow your plan, but life doesn't obey resistance. It mirrors it. When you push against what is, it pushes back. When you soften, it flows around you and carries you forward effortlessly. The first step to non-resistance is awareness. You begin by noticing how often you fight reality. You can feel it physically, a tightening in the chest, a clenching in the jaw, a restless urgency in the mind. These are the body's ways of saying, I am trying to stop what is already happening. The moment you become aware of this contraction, something shifts. Awareness itself is the beginning of release. You take a breath, relax your grip, and realize that what's happening is not your enemy. It's simply life unfolding. This doesn't mean you stop acting. It means you stop fighting with what is before acting. You handle challenges without inner war. You move with events instead of against them. Non-resistance doesn't paralyze, it empowers. It frees energy that was trapped in struggle and channels it into clarity and wise action. From this state, your decisions are no longer reactions. They are responses born from peace. To understand non-resistance as faith, you must recognize that life has an intelligence deeper than your reasoning. The same force that turns seeds into forests and cells into bodies is also orchestrating your path. When you resist, you declare that you know better than this intelligence. When you surrender, you align with it. Faith is not blind belief. It's the quiet knowing that there's a wisdom at work far beyond what the mind can comprehend. Non-resistance is the expression of that faith in motion. There's a profound humility in this. You begin to accept that you are part of a greater flow, not separate from it. You no longer need to force your will upon the world. You participate, but you don't dictate. You act, but you don't control. You let things unfold without panic, trusting that even apparent setbacks serve your evolution. This is not laziness. It's intelligence that sees beyond short-term appearances. Non-resistance doesn't mean you tolerate injustice or deny pain. It means you meet them without adding hostility. You can take action from love, not hate, from clarity, not rage. When resistance drops, compassion naturally arises. You stop seeing others as enemies and start seeing them as expressions of the same life energy moving through you. This shift changes everything. Arguments soften. Conflicts lose their edge. You begin to meet aggression with calm presence instead of equal force, and that calm has more power than any reaction. Resistance thrives on opposition. When you meet it with resistance, it grows. But when you meet it with openness, it dissolves. This is the hidden strength of non-resistance. It transforms rather than destroys. It ends cycles of struggle by refusing to fuel them. It's the wisdom of water, gentle, yielding, yet unstoppable. Water doesn't fight obstacles, it finds its way around them. Over time, it shapes mountains. To live this way, you must unlearn the idea that control equals safety. Control is exhausting because it's built on fear. It's the belief that life will collapse without your constant management. But look closely. Has control ever truly kept you safe, or has it only made you tense? Non-resistance reveals that safety doesn't come from control, but from connection. Connection with the intelligence that sustains everything. When you trust that intelligence, you discover an inner stillness that no chaos can disturb. This stillness is not something you create. It's revealed when you stop struggling. It's already there beneath every wave of reaction. When you rest in it, you notice that even pain loses its sharpness. The experience may still be unpleasant, but it no longer consumes you. You stop turning discomfort into suffering by accepting it as part of the larger rhythm. This is why non-resistance is healing. It allows life to move through you without blockage. What you resist stays. What you accept transforms. Every situation, no matter how painful, becomes bearable when you stop fighting it. Resistance multiplies pain by adding mental noise, stories of blame, fear, and frustration. Acceptance removes that extra layer, leaving only the pure experience, which is always lighter than the mind's story about it. When you practice non-resistance, you begin to notice that most of your suffering was never caused by life itself, but by your attempt to make it different from what it is. Faith in the intelligence behind life doesn't mean you understand its logic. It means you trust its timing. The mind often believes it knows when things should happen, but the universe operates on a rhythm that transcends human scheduling. You may not receive what you want when you want it, but you always receive what serves your growth. When you stop resisting timing, peace replaces impatience. You begin to live in rhythm with the unseen order of existence. This trust transforms how you approach uncertainty. Instead of fearing the unknown, you start to see it as potential. Resistance closes doors. Faith keeps them open. The unknown becomes a space of creation rather than a void of danger. Non-resistance turns uncertainty into a sacred ally because it allows life to surprise you with outcomes far better than your limited expectations. Non-resistance also refines your perception of success and failure. The ego resists failure because it believes it diminishes worth. But when resistance falls, you see that failure is not punishment, it's guidance. It redirects you toward what aligns more deeply with truth. Every loss of one path is the discovery of another. When you stop fighting failure, it stops hurting. It becomes feedback. The practice of non-resistance requires awareness in the small moments. When traffic slows, when someone disagrees, when plans fall apart, these are invitations to trust. Every time you resist, you reinforce the illusion of separation. Every time you release resistance, you remember your unity with life. The more you surrender in these small ways, the more naturally you flow when larger challenges arrive. Non-resistance becomes a way of living, not a practice you perform. This way of being doesn't remove pain from life. It removes unnecessary suffering. You still feel deeply, but your emotions move cleanly, without residue. Anger, sadness, and fear pass through you without leaving scars. The body stays relaxed even when the heart aches. That's because resistance is what turns pain into trauma. When you let feelings arise and fall without clutching them, they complete their cycle and dissolve. You remain clear, whole, and open. Non-resistance also reveals a new form of courage. The world often praises defiance, but the quiet courage of acceptance is far greater. It takes immense strength to face life without needing to control it. It takes faith to stay open in uncertainty, to meet difficulty with calm, to act without aggression. This courage doesn't shout, it steadies. It doesn't need validation because it's anchored in something eternal. As your faith in this intelligence deepens, you start noticing harmony everywhere, even in apparent chaos. Situations that once seemed meaningless begin to make sense in hindsight. You see how life rearranges events perfectly when you stop interfering. You recognize that the universe has always been guiding you, not against you. Each challenge becomes proof of trustworthiness, each delay a sign of timing beyond your vision. Non-resistance doesn't mean never saying no. It means your no comes from clarity, not resentment. Sometimes the most aligned response is firm action, ending a harmful situation, setting a boundary, walking away. But when you do so without inner resistance, your action is clean. It carries no bitterness. You leave no trace of conflict behind because you moved from alignment, not from anger. That's the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is resistance. Response is awareness. Faith, expressed through non-resistance, transforms relationships. When you stop demanding others meet your expectations, you free both yourself and them. You listen without the urge to correct. You speak without the need to dominate. You allow people to be as they are, trusting that life will teach them as it teaches you. This kind of trust brings peace to every connection because it replaces judgment with understanding. The ego fears that if you don't resist, you'll be taken advantage of. But in truth, non-resistance sharpens discernment. When you're not blinded by emotional turbulence, you see clearly what needs to be done. You act effectively because your perception isn't clouded by reaction. Resistance distorts vision. Non-resistance clarifies it. The one who is calm sees the whole field. The one who fights sees only their own struggle. In this way, non-resistance becomes wisdom in motion. It teaches that every challenge is an opportunity to practice trust. You stop asking, "How can I change this?" and start asking, "How can I move with this?" The difference is subtle but profound. The first creates friction. The second creates flow. When you live in flow, outcomes seem to unfold effortlessly, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you no longer oppose it. Non-resistance, as active faith, is the realization that the intelligence behind life doesn't make mistakes. What seems like misfortune may simply be reorganization, the rearrangement of circumstances for your highest good. When you meet life with trust, it responds with grace. The outer world starts reflecting your inner peace. Harmony becomes the natural consequence of faith. Over time, you begin to see that non-resistance is not something you do. It's what remains when fear and doubt dissolve. It's the state of consciousness that arises when you fully accept your unity with existence. From that state, even challenges feel sacred. You don't just survive them, you grow through them effortlessly. Resistance consumes energy, surrender renews it. Faith of this kind doesn't need guarantees. It's a living relationship with the unknown, a constant yes to life's unfolding. You no longer need proof that everything will be okay. You sense it directly. You feel supported by something vast, something that has always been carrying you, even when you thought you were alone. That feeling becomes your foundation. When you live with this understanding, non-resistance becomes your natural response to everything. You act with purpose, but without tension. You speak with conviction, but without argument. You work with passion, but without attachment. You live with depth, but without heaviness. This balance is not learned through effort. It's revealed through trust. And as that trust deepens, you finally understand what true faith means. It's not believing that things will always go your way. It's knowing that whatever happens is the way. You see that even when life seems to break you, it's only breaking what was false. The intelligence behind all things doesn't operate against you, it operates through you. Non-resistance is the embodiment of that truth. It is living faith, not spoken belief. It's what happens when you stop trying to steer the river and allow it to carry you. The current was never meant to drown you. It was meant to return you to the ocean from which you came. When you surrender to that current, peace becomes unshakable, not because nothing changes, but because your trust has become larger than all change. This is the heart of non-resistance as active faith. To let life move through you fully without defense or denial. To trust that even the storms serve the sea. To stop fighting for control and begin resting in cooperation. In that resting, you find not weakness, but the strongest peace you will ever know. The peace that comes when faith replaces fear and alignment replaces resistance. And from that peace, everything begins to flow effortlessly, because you have finally remembered that you were never separate from the intelligence that guides it all. When faith deepens into non-resistance, you begin to experience a strange kind of strength, the strength of ease. You no longer fight against life, nor do you collapse into apathy. You move with clarity, yet without the desperate grip of control. But in this new stillness, another question quietly rises. How do you live fully, act passionately, love deeply, and still remain free? How do you care about life without clinging to it? This is the delicate balance known as the middle path, the razor's edge between desire and detachment, where maturity replaces extremes and peace walks hand in hand with purpose. Most people live pulled between two poles. On one side is desire, the endless striving, wanting and chasing that keeps the mind restless. On the other side is apathy, the cold withdrawal that pretends to protect the heart by not caring. Neither side brings freedom. Desire binds you to outcomes. Apathy numbs you to life itself. The middle path is not halfway indifference. It's the art of caring deeply without being owned by what you care about. It's being fully alive while rooted in inner calm. This balance begins with awareness of your motives. Desire often hides behind the mask of purpose. You say you want something for fulfillment, but underneath, you seek validation, security, or escape. The middle path invites honesty. It asks you to look at the roots of your wanting. When you see that much of your desire comes from lack, you stop chasing from emptiness. Instead, you move from wholeness, from a place where action becomes expression, not compensation. To walk this path, you must learn to hold everything lightly. The tighter you grip your desires, the more fragile you become. Life, by nature, moves. Even the things you love most will change or leave. When you attach your peace to them, suffering follows. But when you hold them with openness, love turns into freedom. You can enjoy deeply without fear of loss, because you understand that nothing can truly be lost. It only transforms. The middle path teaches that caring and letting go are not opposites. They are complementary. True care is born of freedom, not dependency. It allows things to be as they are, even when they don't go your way. You can work passionately for something while being unattached to the result. This is not indifference. It's intelligent devotion. You give your full energy to the present moment, then release it, trusting that life will unfold as it must. This balance becomes clear when you look at how desire operates. Desire itself is not the problem. Desire is movement, the creative pulse of existence. The problem arises when desire turns into craving, when it demands fulfillment to justify your worth. The middle path doesn't reject desire, it refines it. It transforms blind wanting into conscious intention. Instead of being pulled by urges, you become guided by clarity. Apathy, on the other hand, is often mistaken for peace. It looks calm on the surface, but is rooted in fear. Fear of disappointment, fear of pain, fear of vulnerability. It's a defense mechanism that says, if I don't care, I can't be hurt. But this numbness also blocks joy, love, and growth. The middle path exposes this illusion by showing that real peace is not the absence of feeling, but the presence of balance. You can feel everything deeply without drowning in it. The practice of walking this razor's edge begins with small things. You start by observing how you respond when plans fail or people don't meet your expectations. Do you collapse into frustration or withdraw into indifference? Each moment of imbalance is an invitation to return to center. You breathe, release your grip on the story, and remind yourself that you can act without attachment. Slowly, this becomes your natural way of being. In relationships, the middle path becomes love without possession. You give freely without using affection as leverage. You don't cling to people or demand they fill your emptiness. You share your presence, not your need. When they come, you welcome them. When they leave, you bless them. The love that remains is pure, a flow of giving that doesn't depend on reciprocity. This love doesn't shrink when unreturned because it was never built on transaction. It was born from wholeness. In work and creativity, this balance expresses itself as excellence without obsession. You pour yourself into your craft with care, but you don't tie your identity to success or failure. You act with full presence because the act itself is sacred. The result is a byproduct, not a measure of your worth. When you detach from the outcome, paradoxically, your work becomes more powerful because it's no longer clouded by fear of loss or hunger for recognition. Spiritual maturity lies in this subtle understanding that passion and peace are not opposites. The world often tells you that to be peaceful, you must give up passion, or to be passionate, you must sacrifice peace. But the middle path merges them. It's fire without smoke, movement without turmoil. You care deeply, but your peace does not depend on results. You act fully, but you remain inwardly free. This balance turns ordinary living into sacred practice. The mind, however, doesn't like this balance. It thrives on extremes. It wants certainty, not subtlety. It says, either chase everything or detach from everything. But life doesn't operate in absolutes. It dances in nuance. The middle path asks you to live in that nuance, to be engaged but not enslaved, involved but not entangled. It's the maturity of knowing that both grasping and apathy are distractions from truth. Desire becomes wise when it serves awareness rather than ego. When you want something because it expresses your inner growth, not because it compensates for a wound, it aligns with the flow of life. You move with purpose, not pressure. The same energy that once fueled restlessness now fuels creation. This is the transformation of desire into devotion, not devotion to an outcome, but to the act of being alive. To stay centered in this balance, you must practice detachment, not as avoidance, but as reverence. Detachment doesn't mean turning away, it means seeing clearly. It's the recognition that everything in form is temporary and that your peace cannot depend on the temporary. You can appreciate the flower while knowing it will fade. You can love the moment without trying to freeze it. This understanding keeps the heart open and the spirit calm. Apathy, by contrast, closes the heart in an attempt to avoid pain. But closing the heart also blocks grace. The middle path invites openness, even when it hurts. When you live this way, pain becomes clean. It moves through you and passes. Numbness, on the other hand, is heavy. It stagnates the soul. Caring deeply without clinging keeps life vibrant. It's how you stay human while awakening beyond human limitation. Walking this path requires awareness of balance in every aspect of life. In ambition, you learn to strive without strain. In giving, you give without depletion. In love, you offer without ownership. In loss, you grieve without despair. Each polarity becomes an opportunity to discover the still center within movement. The more you practice, the more life stops feeling like a tug of war and starts feeling like a graceful dance. This dance becomes effortless when you trust the rhythm of the universe. When you act from alignment rather than attachment, outcomes no longer define you. You start measuring success by authenticity, not achievement. You realize that what truly matters is not how things turn out, but whether you moved in truth. This awareness brings freedom even in uncertainty. The middle path also teaches how to deal with desire without guilt. Spiritual seekers often condemn desire as the root of suffering, but suppression only drives it underground. The key is not to kill desire, but to purify it, to let it pass through awareness until it loses its grip. You can want something deeply and still be free from it. Freedom doesn't mean having no desire. It means desire has no power over your peace. Equally, the path protects you from the numbness that hides behind false detachment. When you mistake withdrawal for wisdom, you lose the aliveness that makes awareness meaningful. True detachment feels light and expansive, not cold or distant. It allows you to participate in life's unfolding without fear of entanglement. It's the stillness that dances and the dance that remains still. This balance also transforms how you approach change. Desire clings to what feels good. Apathy avoids what feels difficult. The middle path embraces both. It welcomes joy without needing to keep it and meets sorrow without trying to escape it. This acceptance allows transformation to happen naturally. You stop resisting endings and stop forcing beginnings. You live as the witness of both, calm, engaged, and free. When this balance matures, even action becomes meditation. Every step, word, and gesture is done with awareness. You're no longer split between doing and being because both merge into one. The mind becomes quiet even in activity because there's no conflict between wanting and surrendering. You move as life moves, fluidly, without hesitation or regret. Walking this path also refines your understanding of compassion. To care without attachment is the purest compassion. It means loving others not for how they make you feel, but for the sacredness that lives within them. You support, help, and give, but without needing recognition or control. Your love becomes vast because it's not limited by personal preference. This is love as awareness, not possession. Even spiritually, the middle path protects you from extremes. You don't chase enlightenment as an object to obtain, nor do you become indifferent to growth. You stay curious, humble, and engaged, allowing wisdom to unfold naturally. You stop forcing awakening and start living it in every small act of awareness. This is where practice becomes life itself, ordinary moments infused with sacred presence. The essence of this path is trust. Trust that you can care deeply without losing your center. Trust that you can want without being consumed by wanting. Trust that you can act without attachment and rest without indifference. This trust grows through experience, not belief. Each time you release an outcome and find peace still present, faith strengthens. You realize that balance is not fragile. It's your natural state when the extremes quiet down. Eventually, the middle path dissolves the illusion of opposites altogether. Desire and apathy are seen as movements within the same field of consciousness. Both arise and fall within awareness, but awareness itself remains untouched. From that space, you no longer walk a path. You are the path. Life flows through you effortlessly because you've stopped dividing it into what should and shouldn't be. This is the essence of spiritual maturity: to live passionately yet peacefully, to engage fully yet remain free, to care deeply yet let go completely. It's not the avoidance of extremes, but the transcendence of them. You stand between desire and apathy like the still point in the turning world, awake, compassionate, and untangled. And in that stillness, you discover the quiet secret that all teachings point toward. You were never meant to escape life or conquer it, only to participate in it with awareness. When you walk the middle path, life ceases to be a struggle between wanting and resisting. It becomes an effortless expression of being, the dance of care without clinging, the song of peace within movement, the harmony of the human and the divine, moving as one. When balance becomes your natural way of living, when you learn to care deeply without being owned by what you care for, you begin to sense another mystery unfolding beneath the surface of existence. The subtle rhythm between loss and arrival. It becomes clear that life never truly gives or takes at random. Every disappearance makes space for something new. Every ending quietly prepares the ground for the next beginning. There is an invisible order guiding the flow, a rhythm so precise that nothing in it is wasted. The problem is not with loss itself, it's with our interruption of the rhythm. We cling when life is asking us to release, and in that resistance, we block what is already waiting to arrive. This rhythm of loss and arrival is the pulse of creation itself. The universe moves through cycles, birth and decay, rise and fall, expansion and contraction. Everything participates in this dance, from galaxies spinning to the cells in your body renewing themselves. You are not separate from this movement. You are part of its music. When you accept loss as a natural beat in that rhythm, grief softens into understanding. The fear of endings turns into reverence for transformation. Loss is not punishment, it's precision. When something leaves your life, a relationship, a phase, a dream, a part of yourself, it is not chaos, it is correction. Life calibrates through endings, making space for what now aligns with your evolution. You might not see the pattern while you're in the middle of it, but the deeper intelligence behind existence always works through balance. It removes what no longer serves the unfolding of your growth and introduces what will move it forward. The key is to stop resisting this natural tide. Every time you try to hold on to what is fading, you freeze the rhythm. The energy that should move forward becomes trapped in memory and fear. You start living in the echo of what was, rather than the possibility of what can be. The more you grasp, the more painful loss becomes. But the moment you allow what is ending to complete its course, something extraordinary happens. A lightness returns. The space once filled with grief becomes fertile ground for something new to root. Loss is the universe's way of teaching you that attachment and life cannot coexist peacefully. It's a purification disguised as pain. It strips away illusions of control and permanence. You begin to see that what truly belongs to you can never be lost. Only the temporary forms that carried it can fade. The love remains even after the person leaves. The lesson remains after the chapter closes. The strength remains after the storm passes. The outer loss only reveals the inner gain. Arrival, too, has its own rhythm. New things enter when you are ready, not when you beg for them, but when you make room for them. The universe never rushes timing. If something hasn't come yet, it's not denial, it's alignment still in progress. When you learn to let go gracefully, arrival happens effortlessly. The energy you once spent resisting becomes the energy that draws new beginnings. Loss and arrival are not separate movements. They are two notes in the same song. You can feel this rhythm in your own heart. When you exhale, you let go. When you inhale, you receive. You don't mourn the exhale or cling to the inhale. You trust the exchange because it's natural. This is how life intends you to live, not clinging to what has gone, not grasping for what hasn't come, but staying open to the constant giving and taking that keeps existence alive. The only suffering comes from forgetting this rhythm and trying to hold your breath in time. The rhythm of loss also reveals the intelligence of impermanence. The fact that things end doesn't make them meaningless, it gives them value. A flower is beautiful because it fades. A season is precious because it passes. The limited nature of each experience invites you to be present for it fully. When you stop expecting things to last forever, you start living them with depth and gratitude. Impermanence becomes not something to fear, but something to honor. Grief, when met consciously, becomes a sacred teacher. It opens the heart more than joy ever could. Grief strips away pretenses, silences pride, and brings you face to face with what truly matters. It teaches tenderness, not weakness, but sensitivity to life's fragility. Every tear carries truth. Nothing lasts, but everything transforms. You stop clinging to permanence and start trusting continuity, the quiet knowing that nothing real is ever lost, only rearranged. When endings happen, the mind always asks, why now? But the deeper question is, what is life making room for? Every departure creates a vacuum, and the universe does not tolerate emptiness for long. Something will fill that space, whether peace, wisdom, or an unexpected blessing. The challenge is not to rush that filling. Let the emptiness breathe. Let it teach you patience. In that still gap between what was and what will be, you meet the essence of trust. You begin to realize that loss doesn't actually take. It transforms the form through which love, meaning, or energy expresses itself. A relationship ends, but love continues in new ways, in compassion, in gratitude, in growth. A job disappears, but the skills, experiences, and lessons remain, waiting to be used elsewhere. Every loss hides continuity beneath change. When you look closely, you find that nothing is truly gone. It has simply shifted dimension. To recognize this rhythm is to awaken to a new kind of vision, one that sees beyond appearances. When something leaves, instead of labeling it tragedy, you learn to say, this too is movement. You begin to trust that the same force that orchestrated the ending is already arranging the arrival. This trust doesn't eliminate pain, but it softens resistance. It lets you walk through transitions with dignity, holding both grief and gratitude in the same breath. Loss has another hidden blessing. It teaches you how to love without attachment. When you've lost enough times, you learn that holding too tightly only creates pain. True love is spacious. It allows others to change, to leave, to become who they are. You stop trying to freeze connection in time and start cherishing it as it flows. Love, in its pure form, is the acceptance of impermanence. It gives freely, knowing that every shared moment is already complete. Arrival, on the other hand, invites humility. You start to understand that what arrives is never random. It's a mirror of your current inner state. You attract not what you want, but what you are ready for. When you align with truth, life responds in kind. The relationships, opportunities, and experiences that enter your life reflect your level of openness and growth. The more you release resistance, the more gracefully arrivals unfold. Still, the rhythm requires patience. Often, there's a silent interval between the two, between loss and arrival. This gap can feel like nothingness, like being suspended between worlds. The old is gone, the new not yet visible. Most people panic here, rushing to fill the void with distractions or forced beginnings. But that space is sacred. It's the pause where the next melody forms. If you can rest there without interference, what arises will be pure. The stillness between endings and beginnings is where your soul recalibrates. The mind, however, hates uncertainty. It wants closure, clarity, guarantees. But the rhythm of life doesn't work through straight lines. It moves in waves. Just as the tide withdraws before returning stronger, sometimes loss is simply preparation for abundance. You may feel empty for a while, but emptiness is fertile. Seeds sprout in darkness before they break the surface. If you can endure the quiet space between, arrival will feel less like surprise and more like recognition. Each ending in your life can be seen as part of a larger symphony. Some notes rise, others fade. Some movements are joyous, others mournful, but together they create meaning. When you resist one part of the composition, you miss the beauty of the whole. The wisdom lies in listening to all of it. The crescendos of arrival, the silence of loss, the pauses that connect them. When you stop interrupting the rhythm, harmony reveals itself naturally. This understanding also heals regret. Regret comes from believing you could have stopped an ending or forced an arrival sooner. But once you see that timing is woven into life's intelligence, guilt dissolves. You realize you did what you could with the awareness you had, and life did what it needed to do. Every event, chosen or not, played its part in refining you. There's no mistake, only movement toward balance. The rhythm of loss and arrival also deepens gratitude. When you know that everything eventually changes, you start appreciating more intensely what is here now. You savor conversations, sunsets, laughter, even ordinary moments, because you understand they are temporary gifts. Gratitude becomes your way of dancing with impermanence, a celebration of what exists before it transforms again. In this awareness, fear of the future fades. You no longer dread endings because you trust beginnings. You stop trying to predict or protect and start participating in the unfolding. Even sorrow loses its sting because you sense its purpose. Pain becomes a kind of teacher, showing you where you still cling, where you still interrupt the flow. Once you stop interrupting, life becomes rhythmic again, unpredictable yet deeply trustworthy. This rhythm is not something you control, it's something you align with. Alignment happens through presence. When you are present, you meet loss and arrival as they come, not through memory or anticipation, but through awareness. Presence allows you to feel fully without collapsing. It teaches that endings are not personal failures and beginnings are not personal victories. Both are movements of the same universal breath. Every great spiritual tradition points to this truth in its own language. To die before you die, to be reborn every moment, to see through both creation and destruction. This is not poetic philosophy, it's the rhythm of your own existence. Cells die every second to sustain your life. Thoughts fade to make space for new ones. Even sleep is a small death that restores the body. Loss and arrival are not events, they are constants. To fight them is to fight life itself. When you live in tune with this rhythm, peace becomes unshakable. You stop clinging to arrivals and stop grieving endlessly over losses. You flow with both, understanding that each serves the other. You act when it's time to act, rest when it's time to rest, release when it's time to let go. Life stops feeling like a sequence of random changes and begins to reveal itself as an exquisite choreography of timing. At this stage, you also begin to see how loss refines the soul. Each time you let go, something false falls away: pride, certainty, attachment. What remains is purer, lighter awareness. You realize that what truly belongs to you cannot be taken because it was never external to begin with. The outer world reflects inner evolution, not the other way around. Loss doesn't diminish you, it returns you to what is real. Arrival then ceases to be about acquisition. It becomes revelation, the arrival of clarity, peace, insight, love, or opportunity that matches your readiness. You no longer chase arrivals because you know they will come naturally when you are attuned. You focus on staying open, on allowing the current to carry you. This is how abundance flows, not from effort, but from rhythm. Living this way turns life into a continual unfolding rather than a series of disruptions. You start seeing continuity where once you saw endings. You start recognizing that every goodbye carries a hidden greeting. Each chapter that closes sends echoes forward into the next. The rhythm never breaks. Only your awareness of it does. To trust this rhythm fully is to rest in the intelligence behind all movement. You stop fearing time because you see that time itself is the vehicle through which the eternal expresses renewal. You stop mourning what leaves and stop clinging to what comes. You learn to bow to both with equal reverence. The peace that arises from this is not the calm of avoidance, but the stillness of deep participation. You become both witness and dancer in the endless cycle of disappearance and return. And in that understanding, you discover the quiet secret at the heart of all transformation: that nothing truly ends, nothing truly begins. Everything changes form, but the rhythm continues, steady and eternal. The universe breathes through your losses and your arrivals alike. When you no longer interrupt that breath with fear or resistance, life finally reveals its hidden harmony. The music of creation playing endlessly through endings, beginnings, and the silence between them. In the end, every lesson you've explored, from allowing life to unfold, to resting in uncertainty, to trusting karma's rhythm and surrendering to silence, points to one timeless truth. Peace is not found in control, it's found in trust. The art of living is not about mastering the universe, it's about aligning with it. Life will always move. People will arrive and leave. Moments will rise and fade. Joy will come and sorrow will teach. But beneath all of it, there is a stillness within you that never breaks. That stillness is your true home. When you stop chasing what's coming and stop clinging to what's gone, you begin to see that everything is exactly where it needs to be. The universe is not against you. It's shaping you. Every loss refines you. Every arrival renews you. And every pause reminds you that you're part of something vast, intelligent, and deeply loving. So, take a breath. Let what's leaving go without fear. Let what's arriving come without resistance. Trust that you are being carried, always, even when you can't see where. If these words touched something within you, share your thoughts below. Tell us what part of this journey spoke most to your heart. Your reflections might be the light someone else needs today. And if you want to keep growing with this community, learning, healing, and discovering the deeper peace that already lives within you, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. More lessons on presence, awareness, and spiritual strength are on the way. Stay open, stay grounded, and remember, whatever comes, let it come. Whatever goes, let it go.